and see the current situation and how the Kannadigar are reacting and what are the complete situation currently.
You're not really the voice of the entire Karnataka and all Kannadigas. Let them decide if the film, you're already saying it's a flop. So let them decide, let the movie be released in theatres, and that's going to happen now that the Supreme Court has decided and the government of Karnataka has said that they will be following the Supreme Court order in its letter and spirit. Lata Srinivasan, come in, please.
Yes, Maria. I think even the Deputy Chief Minister of Karnataka has supported it, and he said, we will adhere by the law. Feelings have been hurt. He acknowledges that feelings have been hurt and that, Kannadigas are upset, but he says, while that is one aspect of it, we must abide by the law, by the Supreme Court order. So I think, it's a very dicey situation, like Kasturi pointed out. While the movie, has all rights to be released and Kamal Haasan has freedom of expression, ultimately what has happened is people have been hurt. That is one side of it. And now that the movie has failed and it's already been 13 days, I don't think there'll be any takers even if the film's released. So while legally he has won brownie points, at the end of the day, in terms of making money, there's going to be hardly anything. And now it comes to the point of which theaters will release, because they clearly know the movie is not going to do well. So who is going to release this film to empty theaters? Because for them, it's going to be a loss. So there's a lot at stake here. After 2 weeks, while it's a moral victory, it's a legal victory, I really don't think it's going to translate into anything else, unfortunately, for Mr. Kamal Haasan or for the film itself.
Let me give you the last word on the show, Girish Wankade.
Yes, I totally agree that we should respect what court has given us, but the time is too late now. We have already lost the business potential of this film. The film would have done better had it had been released simultaneously before 13 days. Now that even the mandate, the public mandate, the reviews, everything is out, and film has been rejected overall by the entire audience. So definitely it will be very tedious for the theater owners also to showcase this film. It looks difficult and not at all possible. It doesn't make any business sense for the Kannada theater owners to release this film now because it's too late.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Shivanand, Kasturi, Shankar, Girish Wankade, and Lata Srinivasan. Shifting focus to the second story on the left, right, and center. In the next few hours, all eyes will be on the big bilateral, which is going to happen on the sidelines of G7 summit. Prime Minister Modi's invitation to the G7 is being seen as a huge diplomatic overture by the new Canadian leadership to reset ties based on mutual trust and sensitivity. Remember, this is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Canada in a decade. Prime Minister Modi's visit comes amidst signs of a thaw in India-Canada relations, which had hit rock bottom during the tenure of this man, Justin Trudeau, the former Canadian Prime Minister. And tensions had flared up sharply after Trudeau in September 2023, after Trudeau, in fact, alleging that there was an involvement of the Indians in the killing of pro-Khalistani separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia, which was an accusation which was strongly denied by New Delhi. The diplomatic fallout saw India and Canada expel senior diplomats, suspend formal contacts. India had also accused the Trudeau government of allowing pro-Khalistani elements to operate freely on the Canadian soil. Then what happened? Indian envoy to Canada, Sanjay Kumar Verma, who was withdrawn by New Delhi later, was accused by Ottawa of having links to Nijjar murder in June 2023. India, though, at that time had consistently rejected any links to the killing of Nijjar, a designated terrorist, by the NIA, which is the National Investigation Agency, and had in fact accused Trudeau government and Trudeau administration that they were pandering to Khalistani sympathizers for political gains. However, what happened in March? Let me ask, just look at these graphics right here. In March, when Kani, who is an economist and a political newcomer, assumed office, both sides indicated a willingness to move forward. Remember, India and Canada share deep economic and people-to-people ties. If we look at the bilateral trade in goods in 2024, it stood at $8.6 billion. Canada, remember, is home to one of the largest Indian diaspora globally, with over 1.8 million Canadians of Indian origin and another 1 million NRIs living in Canada. They are students, workers, and also in the service sector. While Indian students have historically formed the largest group of international students in Canada, which comprises of roughly around 41%, that was in 2022. But after the immigration curbs, of course, that has been impacted. Let's bring in the guests who are joining us on the show tonight. We have Michael Kugelman, who is the Senior Fellow of Asia Pacific Foundation. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. We have Brahma Chilani, Strategic Affairs Expert. Michael, Prime Minister Modi is in Canada, and of course, there's a lot of anticipation and expectations from this visit. The big focus, of course, would be about efforts to reset ties and how future will be totally dependent on how Ottawa actually responds to New Delhi's core concern. And the New Delhi core concern has been with regards to them almost giving shelter to Khalistani elements. Do you think Kani will be able to tread this path very, very carefully? And will actually able to tread this path?
Carney has been saying all the right things, and the messaging and the tone is very much in contrast to what we heard from the previous Canadian government. And I do think that once you had a new government in place in Canada, it set in motion the possibilities for a reset in ties between India and Canada. So far, so good. And indeed, there have been some reports that Canada and India have even agreed to start sharing intelligence when it comes to tracking down transnational criminals, extremists, and terrorists. I don't think that's yet been confirmed by India or Canada, but there's been some reporting on this in recent days. So, and I should also say that the Canadian government has indicated its desire to work more closely with India on law enforcement issues. So this all suggests a willingness on the part of the new government in Canada to partner with India on these sensitive issues that really was not an option, was not a possibility for cooperation during the previous Canadian government. So those are all good signs, but certainly a long way to go.
All right, Dr. Brahmachalani, you are also of the opinion that it's a long way to go, or will we be seeing some signs emerge today?
Maria, the G7 summit marks an international coming out party for Prime Minister Carney, who won the Canadian election in April. It was he, as you mentioned, who invited Modi. It was the overture. The overture came from Carney. And of course, Modi was happy to accept the invitation to the G7 summit. But the reason why Carney invited Modi was largely because the Canadian economy is stagnating and Canada's relations with both China and India are quite strained. And Carney has decided that he wants to reset relations with these two important giants, India and China. A day before he invited Modi, Carney agreed to high-level talks with China to reset the relationship and to try and reach a trade agreement. So his motive is largely economics. He wants to revive the Canadian economy. He looks at the Indian market as a big market, and that's the main reason why he's seeking to improve relations with India. But India's concerns are actually largely in the political sphere because Canada, for a long period of time, under successive governments since the 1980s, has provided political space to the Khalistanis. It began in the first half of the 1980s when Canada became a haven for Khalistan terrorists, leading eventually to the 1985 twin Air India bombings. Yet, India left Canada off the hook after those twin bombings. In fact, it took Canada 21 years to set up a commission of inquiry into the main bombing, the Air India Flight 181 bombing. And now, in a way, history has repeated itself. Canada has become the global hub of the Khalistan movement. So the real issue for India is, will Canada now begin to rein in these Khalistan militants who are using Canadian soil to make terrorist threats against India? The political space that Canada has provided to these militants is the main Indian concern. And Carney's real test will be whether he will seek to address that core concern of India.
Okay, Michael, these two countries, as you were saying, are working out a new arrangement, perhaps. And this is for law enforcement agencies to share intel on syndicates and terrorism. India has also suggested that Canadian government should check the antecedents of people entering their country illegally and then they later seek asylum. One might say that given the number of Indian origin people living in Canada, that's a huge population, which is roughly around 30 lakh people. Do you think that's a tall ask? And how influential, because this is a very, very influential group that we are looking at, also in Canadian politics, they have stake in it. How will that actually play out then?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is all a very sensitive and complex issue, and it's going to take a very long time for Canada to work through it. But again, I mean, the fact that it's signaled that it's willing to start undertaking these steps, I mean, that's a big change from what we saw with the previous Canadian government. And I think that that could only benefit, or theoretically, that can only benefit ties with India.
So, will you then say that the two sides will be looking at more points of convergence, like trade, climate change, people-to-people connect, rather than looking at the pain points, which got, of course, aggravated during Justin Trudeau's tenure? Because if you look at the economic front, the Canadian Pension Fund, because there were reports suggesting will continue, they continue to be very, very bullish on India, and they have invested over $75 billion, and the trade talks are, in fact, poised to go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, assuming we have a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Carney, it would be relatively short. Given that it would be on the sidelines of the G7 summit, so there would not be a comprehensive agenda, which suggests that the two leaders would say a few things about a number of issues, and that would certainly include, the issues that are easier to talk about. And you hit on trade, absolutely. I think that's something that they would want to hit on. I mean, it's quite notable that despite how bad tensions have been over the last few years, if you look at trade volume, it's been fairly consistent and fairly stable. It has not taken that many hits. And so I think that could be something that they would want to talk about. If you look at something like energy trade and clean energy investment, Canada is one of the largest investors in renewables. I think it's a top 10 investor in renewables. And clearly there are very significant and attractive clean energy markets in India. And so I think there could be a sweet spot potentially for India and Canada. And if they're able to pursue those issues, if they're able to pursue that type of cooperation, that could clearly bolster the relationship on the whole, make it easier for the two sides to sit down and talk about the more delicate issues, the law enforcement issue, the Khalistan issue at the end of the day. So I expect that they will, when the two leaders meet, they will indeed focus on the law enforcement issue, but I don't think that will dominate the discussion. They likely will want the tone to remain positive so that they can cover a number of issues in the brief time that the two leaders have together.
Brahmachalani, so far, the new Canadian administration, the new leadership in Ottawa have struck all the right notes when it comes to sending a message or signaling India. What do you think will be the big takeaway of the bilateral meeting, which is going to happen a few hours from now?
The thing is that we tend to focus too much on the optics, not on the outcomes. For example, the emphasis in India is always on the symmetry, the handshakes, the meetings, not on the outcomes. We should not forget that Prime Minister Carney invited Modi virtually at the 11th hour, right? It was a difficult decision for him, for which he has faced a lot of criticism at home. But he did invite Modi at the last minute. And the fact that he failed to get a trade deal with Trump. The expectation was in Canada that the Trump-Carney meeting yesterday would produce at least some tangible movement toward a bilateral trade deal, because Trump has really targeted Canada in his trade war, which has made Carney's task much more difficult. And that's the main reason why Carney is seeking to improve relations with India and China. But the fact is that these are two major democracies, India and Canada, and traditionally they've had a friendly relationship. So if they can use cooperative diplomacy to address each other's concerns, this relationship could be revived. Therefore, we will have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see as to what emerges from this first effort at improving relations, because much more would need to be done to restore the relationship and to also to allow the two countries to station diplomats in each other's capitals, because right now the two high commissions, the Canadian High Commission in New Delhi and the Indian High Commission in Ottawa, are operating at bare minimal levels. So restoring diplomatic representation at the previous levels is also very important, because you can't have a cooperative relationship when the two diplomatic missions, the embassies, are operating at bare minimal levels. So it will be a process, but I think this first meeting is important in setting the direction.
All right, Brahma Chilani and Michael Kugelman, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We are slipping into a short break. Coming up would be a big NDTV exclusive. We'll get you reports from Pakistan on the impact which is happening on ground zero after India decided to suspend the Indus water treaty. Real impact, real pictures coming up after a short break. Stay with us.
Do you really know the company you invest in? What is the real picture behind presentations and claims? Is the outlook as rosy as the company claims? Know Your Company, powered by NDTV Profit Research, shines a light on the biggest stock market movers.
From the echo of the Trump tariffs to the geopolitical tensions in West Asia, and on the sidelines, a possible thaw in the frosty relations between India and Canada. I will bring you all the latest updates from the Kananaskis G7 Summit. NDTV, live from the G7 Summit in Canada.
How often have you turned away from debates that descend into endless fights? We bring you a show where every question is answered, where every debate finds its resolution, where every story finds its conclusion, where opinions collide but facts prevail. The big NDTV exclusive. After the Pahalgam terror attack, the Modi government took a major step by suspending the Indus Waters Treaty and started regulating the flow of water from the rivers into Pakistan. Now, NDTV has gone to the ground to reveal the impact of India's Indus strike. This is for the first time you are seeing the real impact of India's action on Pakistan from the ground, in the words of Pakistanis themselves.
पानी और खून भी एक साथ नहीं बह सकता।
Post-Pahalgam terror attack, India's first strike on Pakistan. Indus water treaty put on hold on April 23rd, a day after the ghastly attack. India started to strictly regulate the flow of water from three rivers of the Indus river system, Jhelum, Chenab and Indus, into Pakistan. Information accessed by NDTV from Pakistan shows India's water strike has started to hurt the neighboring country. According to the daily water situation report of Pakistan's Indus River System Authority, on June 5th this year, Pakistan government's Indus River Water System Authority released 1,24,500 cusecs of water to Punjab province. Whereas a year ago, on June 5th, 2024, 1,43,600 cusecs of water was released, which means this year Pakistan's Punjab province got 19,100 cusecs or 13.30% less water.
Whereas the data for June 16 shows that total water released from Indus River system to Pakistan's Sindh province was 1,33,000 cusecs. Whereas the amount of water released to the province last year on June 16 was 1,60,000 cusecs. This shows water released by IRSA to Sindh province is 27,000 cusecs. That is 16.87% less this year vis-a-vis last year as on June 16th.
Receding water level in Pakistan's Indus River system threatens the Kharif crop sowing in the country. Kushal is a resident of Muzaffarabad in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. He says, if India stops water, he will suffer.
मैं इसी दरिया का काम करना, इस दरिया से जड़ा है पानी ना होगा ना तो रिजक सारे असम बच्चे का मुतासर हो जाती। पानी की वजह तो रिजक आंदा है, पानी आंदा दरिया में रेत आंदी है, रेत काट के बच्चे का निजाम चलाने।
Ishtaq Hussain is a farmer from the Tandali area near Muzaffarabad. He cultivates corn on the banks of Jhelum. He also fears India cutting the water flow.
असां में रोजगार जिहड़े तमाम तर फैक्टरां दे जरिए काम करते हैं, ज़राअत ते काम करते हैं। अगर दरियावां दा पानी बारिशां नहीं हो रही, अगर दरियावां दा पानी पीछे हो जाते हैं तो अस दी ज़राअत दी तमाम मुतासर हो जाती है। कोई गल्ला नहीं हो सकता, कोई रिज़्क असीं मतलब ज़रिया माश तमाम इसका ज़मींदारी नाल। अगर दरअसल बारिशां नहीं हैं तो दरिया का पानी तो है ही है, दरिया के पानी से लागा मोटर का सप्लाई करके अपने जमीनों को देने हैं। अगर वो ना होगा तो असां दे बच्चे बिल्कुल भुखे जाए मरते हैं।
Ishtaq's brother Muhammad Hussain Shah also shares the same fears.
ਅਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਦਾਰ ਲੋਕ ਹਾਂ, ਖੇਤੀਬਾੜੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਦਰਿਆਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਦਰਿਆ ਜਲਮ ਦੇ ਉਤਾਰ ਅਸਾਂ ਪੰਪ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਲਾਏ ਦੇ, ਮੋਟਰਾਂ ਲਾਈ ਦੀਆਂ, ਟਰੈਕਟਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸਾਂ ਟੈਂਕੀਆਂ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵੀ ਰੱਖੀ ਦੀਆਂ। ਤਾਂ ਅਗਰ ਮੋਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਅਗਰ ਪਾਣੀ ਬੰਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਅਸਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਗਾਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਗਾਰ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਊ।
Experts believe that reduced flow from India will have a major impact on Pakistan's agriculture.
जो पहलगाम वाक़या हुआ उसके बाद जो इंडिया ने 149 माहिदा मतल करके उन्होंने ये दोनों दरियाओं का पानी रोकने की धमकी दी है। ये आप देखें अगर चकोटी से लेकर जो मंगला डैम तक दरिया के साथ साथ जितने भी इलाके हैं ये सारा इन्हिसार ज़राअत का ये डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली जो है ये दोनों दरियाओं के पानी पर है।
Pakistani experts fear India's hardening of water stance will have devastating impact on the country's whole environment ecosystem.
Prior sharing of flow data with Pakistan, तो उसमें एक जो सबसे बड़ा जो इशू हमें आ रहा है वो ये आ रहा है कि जब वो रिवर के फ्लो को जब वो रेगुलेट कर लेते हैं या वो कंट्रोल कर लेंगे, तो उसके बाद आपके जो डाउन स्ट्रीम उसके इम्पैक्ट्स है ना, इमीडिएट वो आते हैं आपके रिवर आए, जो आपके इकोसिस्टम है या जो रिवर इकोलॉजी है उसके ऊपर आएगा। अब उसके बाद जो दूसरा इसका इम्पैक्ट होता है वो रिवर हाइड्रोलिक्स के ऊपर भी होता है। जब आपका फ्लो आल्टर्ड फ्लो आ रहा हो, कभी बहुत कम और कभी बहुत ज़्यादा, तो जब बहुत ज़्यादा फ्लो आएगा तो ऑब्वियसली वो रिवर डाउन स्ट्रीम आपकी साइड एरियाज़ में, जो आपका जिस तरह का हमारा हिली टेरेन है, वो ज़मीन के कटाव की वजह बनेगा, उससे लैंडस्लाइड्स भी ट्रिगर हो जाते हैं।
Former Indus Commissioner A.K. Bajaj told NDTV, monsoon is still weeks away, and in the coming weeks, Pakistan's water crisis will further worsen.
Northern region reservoirs in India, it has been precarious since the last 5-6 months, and there is less water overall in the whole of the northern region and the northeast region also. So that northern region includes the western rivers also, which go to Pakistan, and there is less water in these rivers in these years. And Pakistan has majorly bigger crisis on this, because 80% of their agricultural sustenance is based on the Indus water system only. So when there is less water in the Indus waters, it is going to affect the agriculture system of Pakistan.
In fact, once monsoon begins, Pakistan will have to face fresh challenge.
After suspending the Indus Water Treaty on 23rd April, India has stopped sharing all kinds of information and data with Pakistan regarding the water level in the three western rivers of the Indus river system, Jhelum, Chenab and Indus, that flow from India to Pakistan. This could be devastating for Pakistan, especially during the monsoon season, because when the water levels will rise in these rivers, India will not give any prior information to Pakistan regarding the possibility of a flood disaster inside Pakistan.
I think India's decision to hold the treaty in abeyance stems from the trigger of the Pahalgam attacks, obviously, right? Our anger, our pain, we want to show Pakistan some steps. But along with it, the basis of that is that for many years, we've been asking Pakistan to sit down on the tables with us and to renegotiate, discuss the treaty. Pakistan has been simply stonewalling and not listening to our requests.
Strategic affairs experts believe India's Indus actions will have both short and long-term impact on Pakistan. In near future, India will regulate the flow of the water from Indus river system, whereas in the long term, India plans to build big water storage structures to be able to use more and more water from these rivers. It's clear that Pakistan is in for a water and agricultural crisis. With camera person Rakesh Singh, Himanshu for NDTV.
And it can be seen clearly on ground in Pakistan. Dr. Tara Karta is joining us. She is former Director, National Security Council Secretariat. Dr. Tara Karta, we are seeing the impact. There was the decision that was taken on 23rd April. It was foreseen that this will have the nature of this impact with the monsoon season right here, and also the impact on the agriculture, because particularly in that entire region of Punjab, 80% of the farmers are dependent on this water.
See, I think for years, I've said, I think on your channel before also, that this is one of the dumbest treaties ever signed. I'm sorry to put it plainly. The Indus Water Treaty, I don't know how on earth we signed it. 80% goes to them, the rest to us. That was one. Number two, no revision clause, no exit clause. What kind of a treaty is this? So that apart, we've been saying, okay, we signed it. We said, okay, let's talk about it, because there is climate change. There's a lot of stuff going on. They refuse to talk about it. And Maria, what I found really strange is even those projects which would have actually benefited Pakistan, like the Pakul Dul, it would have stopped flooding in their areas, and it was their Indus Water Commissioner had actually agreed to it. Then he went back, and then of course the army must have sort of breathe, so literally sat on him, and he came back and he said, "Sorry, I can't do this anymore. We cannot allow Pakul Dul Dam." So the attitude has been one of opposing everything that you do, regardless of the fact that it is harming Pakistan. So, right now, until even after Pulwama, we continued to cooperate with them on the Indus water data, and some amount of data sharing we withheld, but otherwise, we were on with the Indus Water Treaty. How much more generosity can you expect?
Dr. Tarakanta, not anymore. That's what the Water Resources Ministry here is saying, that not anymore will that data be shared of how much water will be released and what is the level of water, not anymore.
Indeed, absolutely. And also the fact, I mean, the very real fact that all of us, there is, like I think, as somebody said on the show, there's a reduced water availability anyway. And this is going to get worse. If Pakistan had the slightest sense, they would, start off by trying to reopen negotiations on the treaty and giving in where it is good for them, and say, let's now deal with this climate change, climate shift together. They should start desilting their own canals. They should start doing a bunch of things which they can do themselves. But instead, they will push themselves into a corner and then blame India for everything. So this time, we actually did what they blamed us for years. Okay, for years they said we are stopping water when we never did. And when their Indus Water Commissioner, Jamaat Ali Shah, said India is not stealing a drop of water, he had to flee the country. He had to literally leave the country and go to Sweden. So now it is being done. So there we go.
All right, Dr. Tarakanta, I appreciate your time. Now, bringing you another NDTV special report. This is normalcy, which is starting to return to Jammu and Kashmir after the Pahalgam terror attack. 16 tourist spots that were closed in Jammu and Kashmir after Pahalgam terror attack being reopened for tourists. Here's a special report by Nazir Masoodi, who's reporting from the Betab Valley.
Tourist spots have been reopened here in Pahalgam, so are the adventure activities, and this is zip line cycling here at Betab Valley, one of the famous tourist spots that has been reopened today for the tourists. A large number of tourists are coming, enjoying this adventure activity here in Pahalgam. There's several other tourist spots that remain closed for last 2 months have been reopened today, restoring the confidence of the tourists and also restoring the livelihood of the people here who had actually lost their livelihood for last 2 months. And let me show you what it means, because there are a large number of tourists who have been coming here on an average in this park. 1,500 to 2,000 people would come here every day. But for last 2 months, nobody turned up. And this morning, this park by the Betab Valley was open, which is very, very famous tourist spot, which is named after Bollywood film movie Betab, which was shot here in 1980s. And since then, large number of people. But because of the Pahalgam terror attack on April 22nd, we saw entire, tourist activities have come to a halt. As you can see here, young children and people enjoying here this zip line cycling or the sky cycling here in Betab Valley, here in Pahalgam. Really a fun, as people are really enjoying. They are coming back to their favorite tourist destinations here in Pahalgam, as 16 tourist destinations across Jammu and Kashmir have been reopened today, and it's only the first phase. And other tourist destinations which were closed after Pahalgam terror attack would be now reopened in a phased manner.
Last year, in fact, in 2024, Jammu and Kashmir had seen a record tourist footfall. And there is certainly this hope now that after the terror attack, where we saw a massive dip, there would be the tourists will start having that faith in Kashmir and they will go the beautiful valley. 5 days since the tragic Ahmedabad crash, India mourns its heroes and its loved ones. From a heartbroken father in Delhi to a shattered village in Gujarat, grief echoes across the country as the final journeys begin for those who lost their lives in the Air India tragedy. Colleagues, families, and entire communities. All of them are united, also in remembrance. Here's a ground report on the emotional goodbyes and the stories behind the names.
Captain Sumit Sabharwal's 88-year-old father, Pushak Raj Sabharwal, broken. His wait for his son to take an early retirement to spend time with him will never end. He's sending his 56-year-old son on his final journey. The solace, Captain Sumit Sabharwal's last flight may have ended in tragedy, but his memory lives on as a man of duty, dignity, a son devoted to his father. Among those known like veteran industrialist Niranjan Hiranandani,
devastated to say the least, and I think only justice can be to use this moment to study the case thoroughly and leave no gaps for the future.
And the common man.
First thing for a parent is to see their child go.
Mera sat naman. He was such a dedicated son, committed pilot, such a wonderful person, such this thing. Itna parents ko dhyan rakhna, itna uncle ko dhyan rakhna, pure parivar ko leke itni patience.
The story was no different at Mulund, the home of Shraddha Dhawan, Captain Sabharwal's colleague and in-cabin supervisor of the ill-fated flight. She leaves behind a 15-year-old daughter and a husband who also works with Air India. "21-year-old Maithili Patil, another crew member on the ill-fated Dreamliner, also returned home to her roots in a village in Raigad for the last time. A young life gone too soon. The skies in Amreli, Gujarat wept as the city bid farewell to Arjun Patolia. Arjun, a UK resident, is the face of a trail of tragedies. He came home to immerse his wife Bharti's ashes in the Narmada, leaving his 4 and 8-year-old daughters in London. They will never see him again. With Anuj Raite, Radhika Ramaswamy, NDTV 24/7.
If it matters to you, if it matters to you, if it matters to you, it matters to India. It matters to India. And it matters to me. And it matters to me.
India Matters with Shivaru, only on NDTV 24/7.
I've been reporting on all issues big and small from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I'm bringing that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years. I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti, also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
India's IT capital is always bustling, a city full of startups, stories and surprises. And I keep you ahead on all the Bengaluru buzz.
The
Markets move fast.
And so should your portfolio. Expert insights, real-time stock picks.
Do I buy Ola?
Should I hold ICICI CDSL for the long term?
Buy, sell or hold.
The answers you need, straight from the experts.
Callers from India and across the world. Connect live, ask, decide and invest wisely.
Your portfolio, your future. Ask Profit.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. You're watching the News Night and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. Tonight, it's a big night. The world is holding its breath. Why? Because Trump has rushed back to Washington. His G7 visit has been cut short, and right now as we speak, he's inside the White House's Situation Room. He's not just there, he's putting out some very, very important statements, what you are reading right now on your screens. You're wondering what is the top agenda? It is what's happening between Israel and Iran. It's a conflict now that is spiraling into its most dangerous phase, if we can say that. What is official is that Israel has also struck Natanz, that is Iran's underground nuclear site. This has been confirmed by the nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, and it has also said that yes, this was a direct hit. Now, Trump's warning is also chilling. What does Trump say? He says evacuate Tehran, and in a fiery message, you have Israel warning Khamenei and saying that you could meet Saddam Hussein's fate. We all know what that means. So what is Trump planning to do? What could happen in the next few hours? You also have this final warning, or is this just a start of something worse? Should the world brace up for what possibly could happen? Is this the night that everything changes? We do not know, but let's quickly get you breaking updates on what's been happening on the story. And like I said, Donald Trump is in the Situation Room right now as we speak, and he's also putting out information and his statements on the social media, parts of which you see right now on your screens. He says our patience is running thin, and all this is happening after you have seen him making those big, bold statements. He's put out that warning to Iran. He says there will be total control over the Iranian skies. What does that mean? He says air dominance. He's speaking about it. What could this entail? Does this mean there is already something happening as we speak? And Donald Trump has also spoken on the supreme leader of Iran, and he says we are not killing him just now, but we know where he is. Obviously wanting to put pressure on Iran, the same Iran that says it is not backing off. Iran says we are not de-escalating. What will happen? Could a deal be signed? Could there be a ceasefire? We do not know. But on your screens are multiple responses that have come in from Donald Trump, as we have seen that entire story getting bigger, and it's not just him. Earlier, the US Vice President has also put out an important statement on the Iranian nukes. And this again is important because J.D. Vance had said, and allow me to quote, he said the president is consistently making it clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And he also said that Iran cannot have uranium enrichment. This, again, remember, has been under the radar. He said that the president, that is Donald Trump, has made it clear that it will be ensured. And look at the next words, because these are important. He says it will be done in an easy way or the other way. So which is the easy way? Is the easy way that you sit together, you sign a deal, and you have a ceasefire, or what could be the other way? Could we see Donald Trump announcing that he's getting into this war officially? Is that possible? No one knows, because with Donald Trump, unpredictability is the next word. So these are, just remember, a lot of those breaking updates that we've got to you on top of a show, on a story that has generated a lot of interest from across world capitals. But let's quickly rewind to what has happened in the last few hours. On your screens are details of the date and the time. We begin by June 17, 4 a.m. That is where Donald Trump said that everyone should evacuate Tehran. That is the first big warning that came in from Donald Trump. Let's quickly bring the next detail for our viewers to understand where is the story moving. Then again, in the next few minutes, on the same date, he says Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. again making his stand very clear. We'll keep moving this fast so that we have all updates on our screens quickly. He says, my leaving has nothing to do with the ceasefire. He's referring to his quick exit from the G7. He says this is much bigger than that. It's not about my leaving. We are talking of something really big. What is this big something that Donald Trump is referring to? He says, I have not reached out to Iran, and I'm not doing that, is again what he underscores. He also says, don't ask for peace talks. Clear message to Iran, because he has said that we had given them 60 days. Nothing happened. Then he said on the entire reports of a conversation happening between Donald Trump and the other parties in Iran and Israel, he said highly fabricated fake news. Not happening. I'm not talking to anyone. And you will see the entire timeline where just in a matter of few minutes, he goes on to put out this information, or he's speaking to the media. He says Iran should have taken the deal that was on the table. Is this Donald Trump just pulling back? No one knows. But as we speak, he, remember, is in the White House's Situation Room, and he's now said, we want a real end. Real end is what Donald Trump says. Sit back for the next few seconds, watch and hear what Donald Trump has said in the last few hours to help you understand, is the US getting into this conflict right away?
Situation room tomorrow at any point?
Yeah. Tomorrow morning, girl. While you're sleeping. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, I think it's safer. There's a lot of bad things happening. I think it's safer for them to evacuate. And then a real end, not a ceasefire, and then
so something that will be permanent.
or giving up entirely. That's okay too.
And remember, it's a story that is developing in real time. My team tells me that there are more breaking updates right now coming in on what really is happening. And if this is any indication, it clearly is not looking good. We told you that Donald Trump is in the White House. He's been putting out information where he says that we know where the Iranian supreme leader is. We are not killing him right away. But he also says that we have supremacy over the Iranian skies. He doesn't just stop there. Now, there are reports coming in that tell us that the US is moving more fighter jets to the Middle East. This is significant. Keeping in mind that, remember, already the US, that is the United States of America, has a significant presence when you talk of the entire region. We will go here on the show and tell you where exactly are those deployments. And in the last few hours, you have seen these deployments, in fact, going up. What we are learning through Reuters, and allow me to put this information out, they say that the US military is deploying more fighter aircraft to the Middle East, extending the deployment of other warplanes, bolstering the US military forces in the region as the war between Israel and Iran rages, is what the US officials have said. What does this mean? I quickly want to get Dr. James Dorsey, who's a journalist and an expert on the Middle East, who's also joining us. Dr. James, thank you so much for your time. It's a story developing very, very fast. Do you see America, do you see Trump getting into this conflict right away?
I think Trump is being ambiguous. With other words, it's not clear whether his belligerent remarks, if you wish, are designed to force Iran into a return to negotiations, but in a weakened position, and submit to Trump's demands, or if he is not interested in negotiations at this point, considering supporting Israel in a more stronger fashion with or without direct U.S. involvement in the hostilities.
Okay, I think you've been very clear and direct, keeping in mind that the story clearly is moving very, very fast. And what are the options before Donald Trump? I mean, this is something that a lot of us have been discussing. How far can Donald Trump really go? Now, on your screens is just a broader understanding of what could happen. Remember, there are just two ways to deal with this situation at hand. One is you go in for coercive diplomacy. The other is military options. Coercive diplomacy versus military options. Which side is Donald Trump going to move? What is it that's going to be discussed in the Situation Room as we speak? Now, in case he goes in for a coercive diplomacy, what does this mean? Remember, he has been speaking about how Iran wants a deal. Either he pushes that line and he continues to ensure that there is some kind of a conversation happening. This could then lead to a lot of these back channel talks that could get underway vis-a-vis Iran, Israel and the US. And this is a way, a kind of a de-escalation that could take place in case Trump goes in for coercive diplomacy. But clearly, this also has a lot of risks. Before I tell you risks, I want to ensure that we get the next pointer up on our screens as far as coercive diplomacy is concerned. And remember the threat. The threat or the leverage is of that significant GBU-57 big bomb that America could show to Iran to ensure that there is some kind of a de-escalation and then pressure Iran to control the strikes. But would Iran be willing to do that? What really are the risks involved? Let's play out the risks also. Now, Iran could actually then slam doors on diplomacy. It could be the end of that conversation. Will Donald Trump be willing to do that? No one knows. Let's bring up the next risk also as far as this particular option is concerned. Is Tehran stalling or they are serious? Because there is a lot of chatter that Iran also just wants to buy time. It does not want any deal. We do not know, but I think the next few hours will hold an important clue as far as this particular risk is concerned. The other option that a lot of people have been speaking about is the military option. You go all out. Now, what could Trump do then? He could drop the bunker buster bombs on Iran's Forward nuclear site. Now, this again, remember, are important, significant, lethal weapons that the US could use in case it goes in for this military option. Let's bring up the second important pointer also on our screens. It could also, on the other side, arm Israel with jets and bombs, with sophisticated technology that already Israel does have, but it could add to all that strength in case Donald Trump goes in for this option. And then, obviously, this will mean that he will back Israel's call for action. Because Israel has been saying this, you need to go all out. You need to hit Iran because we cannot have Iran developing a nuclear program like this. Will Donald Trump say yes? And not to forget something again that is quite probable is that you could have the US and Donald Trump citing fresh intel on Iran's nuclear buildup as a reason to go in for a strike. Will that happen? What are the risks? Clearly, every option, remember, has pros and cons. On your screens now are risks. The first obvious thing, if Donald Trump goes in for this full escalation and the military option, this could actually spark a huge full-square West Asia war, something that the world also dreads. It could then also mean that the US will be forced to divert its focus from China and the Pacific, something that it has largely been focused on. Would it be willing to do that? Let's bring up the next important information for you because this is the military buildup. As you talk of what has the US placed in the Middle East region, because right now we are looking at it also bolstering everything. We are talking of Qatar first up, which again has major operations hub and about 8,000 troops that are deployed there. In fact, we'll keep moving this fast because I want to see if there are more updates vis-a-vis Donald Trump here. Likewise for Bahrain, which is about a 9,000 personnel. These, remember, are all military stations or bases that the US already has, and this is also the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters. So you already see a lot of these US vessels, US military personnel parked at all these locations in the Middle East. And now the idea is to just bolster this. Likewise, if you move to Kuwait, you're looking at the Camp Arif Jan there, and these are key logistics and joint forces base that possibly again could be used in case the US wants to do it. Likewise, the next Other important country we are talking about is the UAE, where you have about 3,500 US troops stationed as we speak. This is important for intel, important for surveillance, and also for strike operations. So clearly, we are seeing a lot of important movement as far as this is concerned. But what should we be prepared for? What is this deployment that is indicating? I want to go back to Dr. James Dorsey, who's been patiently waiting. Now, James, you're looking at military options versus coercive diplomacy. What do you think that Donald Trump most likely could be moving towards? What do these signs and indications tell us?
First of all, I think it hinges on two things. One is what happens between Iran and Israel and how these hostilities evolve. The second is Trump. I think Trump still ultimately wants a negotiated deal. But keep in mind that Trump's negotiating strategy is essentially, this is what I want, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, the price is going to be very high. That's a strategy that hasn't worked with Iran in the past for 46 years. But that could very well be the strategy that he pursues, whether that's for increased support for Israel, but Israel is the fighter, or whether the United States gets involved directly.
Okay, I think no one knows what could happen. Military option versus the coercive diplomacy is a very tightrope walk right now that you will see the US doing. But as we speak, and this is all the action that is centered in the Situation Room, but what is this Situation Room? What really goes on there? What really are the decisions that are being taken, and how does it operate? I think this is something that our viewers will also find interesting. So let's get these details right up here on our screens. What happens in the Situation Room? First up, where is it? It is buried deep in the basement of the West Wing of the White House. Time and again, you have seen a lot of US presidents in that Situation Room taking important decisions. Let's bring up the next important detail as far as the Situation Room is concerned. Who has the access? Considering it's an all-important room, the access is limited to the president, the vice president, the national security advisor, the defense secretary. So right now, as we speak, you have all of them who are a part of the National Security Committee right inside the White House, taking that decision on what to do next. Also, this is America's nerve center for war, for intel, and for crisis response. And this is a very, very important situation we are talking about. Let's bring up more details. As far as the Situation Room is concerned, it handles real-time military operations and top secret briefings. So clearly, as we speak, Donald Trump could be getting real-time updates, figuring out what is going on, what has Iran said, what is Israel doing, and world over, remember, there is a lot of conversation again of the fact that why did Donald Trump cut short that G7 trip? Why did he come back? Why did he come back to his home turf? He lands up in the Situation Room, and this is where all the action now has shifted. Also in the Situation Room, remember what happened? This is where Bush led the entire conversation and monitored this during 9/11. So that is how significant this Situation Room is. This is also where Obama tracked Osama's killing. Remember, he was killed in that precision strike again by America deep inside Pakistan, the rogue state. The same rogue state, we do not know where Osama is. But this is where the decision was taken and everything was followed as far as Osama's killing is also concerned. Likewise, this was used during Soleiman's strike during Trump's previous tenure. So you have seen presidents over the years taking some very, very important decisions in the Situation Room that right now is the focus of this entire issue about what could America do, what could the next few hours entail, and when was it set up? This is an important information. It was established in 1961 by the then President Kennedy. So that is for how long you have seen different US presidents, their establishments, their security apparatus sitting here taking decisions. This is also where Donald Trump is. Before we move ahead, I want to rewind to what has happened in the last few hours. Sit back and watch what has Donald Trump said. What are the words he has used? What are the indications that he has put out? as he continues to be in the White House's Situation Room. But everything that he has said over the last many hours will hold a key to what Trump is wanting to do vis-a-vis Iran and Israel. Listen in.
Think you'll be in the Situation Room tomorrow at any point?
Yeah. Tomorrow morning, girl. While you're sleeping. Goodbye, everyone. Yeah, I think it's safer. There's a lot of bad things happening. No, I think it's safer for them to evacuate. And then a real end, not a ceasefire, and then so something that will be permanent, or giving up entirely. Is that okay too?
So Trump says we want a real deal. What is he doing? What is the decision that he's taking? Clearly, these are important details that I'm trying to find out more about so we can share with you in real time. There are also images, I'm told, of the escalation that are coming in, parts of which you will see on your screens. But I want to go back to Dr. James Dorsey, who's a journalist and an expert on Middle East, and he has said that Donald Trump has been ambiguous. We do not know what he's doing. But Dr. James, now, when you see him being in a Situation Room, the deployment in the Middle East has also increased. There are those reports coming in. Are we looking at an expanded war or something beyond that?
Well, I think the Situation Room, basically, you don't go to the Situation Room if you're about to have a ceasefire. You go to the Situation Room when you have a conflict. Again, the question is why would Trump at this moment want conflict or an escalation of the conflict? My reading is he may see that as a way to increase pressure on Iran and basically put Iran in a position in which it has no choice but to return weakened to the negotiating table.
Okay, so you believe that we could have an expanded war, but we still do not know what Donald Trump is really thinking. Now, on your screens are images that are coming in right now, and I'm told that these are live. And all this is happening as you have Iran launching the 10th phase of Operation True Promise. And they say that there are massive missile and drone barrage that have been noticed. So as Donald Trump is in the White House taking a decision on what will happen, as Donald Trump says that we own the airspace over Iran, you have Iran launching what they are calling is the 10th phase of Operation True Promise with massive missile and drone barrages. As we stay with these images, I also want to get in our colleague Disha, who's tracking this story from our newsroom, and she joins us live. Disha, what is the latest? What can you tell us?
So we've been hearing for the last couple of hours, in fact, that IDF, in fact, had also tweeted that they are seeing Iranian missiles which are which are being targeted towards Israel. And in fact, they had said that Israeli defense systems are working at intercepting these missiles. But we don't have exact details as to how many missiles have been launched and what has been intercepted so far. But the visuals do show that there has been certain impact. These are visuals from Iranian state media, but now Iran has confirmed the fact that the 10th phase of the Operation True Promise 3 has been launched, and a massive barrage of missiles, visuals are showing that massive barrage of missiles are now being launched towards Israel. And we're going to see, again, a massive escalation in this conflict that we're seeing. It's the 5th consecutive day that both the sides have been trading missiles. And this comes also at an interesting point that we're seeing US President President Donald Trump make these really strong statements on Truth Social, saying that he knows the exact location of Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei, saying that he's going to, in fact, that for the time being, he's in fact not going to target Khamenei, but he knows the exact locations. Apart from that, various other statements and developments coming in. Even the US military is now deploying, according to reports, deploying fighter jets towards the Middle East to really control the situation. But escalation definitely in this developing situation in the Middle East.
Oh yes, Disha, I'll just give you 30 seconds to sum up what is happening. On one side, you have Donald Trump in the Situation Room taking a decision, and he says that we have dominance over the skies of Iran, and look at what Iran is doing. I mean, the timing is very, very critical, Disha.
Absolutely, the timing is crucial, and really these harsh statements, these very strong statements coming in. I'm just going to read it, saying that he even called the Supreme Leader, Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei, an easy target.
Yes.
And he's saying that his patience is wearing thin and Iran needs to come to the table and sign some sort of agreement. Even earlier in the day, we did hear that the US president is no longer looking for any sort of ceasefire, but in fact a permanent solution and end to this conflict and these tensions, and no longer just a temporary truce. So it definitely signals an escalation in the tensions in the region.
Oh, absolutely. So this is going to be a long, long night. Very, very significant, as you have seen Donald Trump almost saying a lot of things, Disha, that if people, interested can also figure out that clearly J.D. Vance also said that we will get what we want to get done. Either it's going to be the easy way or the other way. Which is the easy way? Which is the other way? We are tracking that story. NDTV will continue to be on top of the story. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
The last 1 month, if you see, the share prices of Genzol Engineering has fallen more than 58%.
Why are the rating firms calling the debt payments as default?
We have two credible credit rating agencies on March 4th coming and downgrading the stock to D.
Statements are consistently being proven wrong, and transactions are being taken place which are different from what they were originally pictured to be.
The company claimed it would roll out 6,400 electric vehicles. But what it has rolled out is a shocking scam. Funds meant for the project were funneled allegedly back to the promoters, the Junkie brothers. What did the money buy? Not EVs, of course, but a lavish flat in Gurgaon's luxurious DLF Carmelias.
News is not just headlines, it is what impacts you. And news should never be mistaken for noise. What matters is the reality. Accurate, in-depth, and with the right perspective. For over 20 years, I have been a journalist, and never has clarity mattered more than now. At Newsnight, we go beyond the surface. We dissect the details, challenge the narratives, and bring you the unparalleled clarity you deserve in a world clouded by misinformation. We are bold, we are direct. Newsnight, for the news in your interest. Only on NDTV 24/7.
Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad. India's latest aviation disaster. India responds to the tragedy. Facts first, 100% ground reports.
Under this is the tail,
Here, and this is just one of the buildings that will give you an idea of the quantum of loss.
24 to 48 hours is the deadline that has been given for the DNA testing.
Maximum reporters, maximum coverage on NDTV.
Why was there a hurry? Was it the government that was in a hurry?
I don't want to blame anyone.
Joining us today here in the NDTV newsroom,
Government cannot walk away from this responsibility.
Cricket is region of sort in this country. Would you like to comment on what happened?
What is the condition of the injured at this point? How many people died?
What exactly happened? You have lost your daughter.
If it matters to you, if it matters to you, if it matters to you, it matters to India. It matters to India. It matters to India. And it matters to me. And it matters to me.
India Matters with Shivaru. Only on NDTV 24/7. Is your business future ready? Join the 13-week strategic ESG certification program for business sustainability and growth for CXO and business leaders by NDTV, Terry and Zenora. Master global ESG frameworks, gain real-world tools, and lead with impact. Starts July 13th. Enroll now and power your business with sustainability.
As the Iran-Israel war escalates, Indian students in the crossfire.
As soon as possible evacuate किया जाए.
War zone worries grip parents. The next Indian mass evacuation ahead. NDTV at Ground Zero. Three days after the Air India crash, a desperate wait for DNA tests, agonizing wait for identity, the fight for dignity in death. Doctors knee-deep in heartbreak. NDTV live from Forensic Center. A sorrowful quest for DNA match. Science and sorrow at Ahmedabad Hospital. Doctors fight to give ID to remains.
Do you really know the company you invest in? What is the real picture behind presentations and claims? Is the outlook as rosy as the company claims?
A very good evening. Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast on the G7 summit that Prime Minister Modi is attending at Calgary in Canada. Both the summit and the visit hold special significance since this is the first foreign visit of the Prime Minister since Operation Sindoor. Oh yes, and this is also a special broadcast here on NDTV where we are walking you through both first the lowdown on the Israel war, because that is also a story, Gauri, that we are tracking very, very closely. That's cast this huge shadow over the G7 summit. President Trump, remember, did make an early exit, and people have been questioning, why did he do this? What is he going to do next? And as we speak, he's chairing that all-important meeting with his national security team, Gauri,
indeed,
at the Situation Room.
Absolutely. And Trump has pushed out a series of posts on his social media platform threatening Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. President Trump claims that US has locked in his location, making him an easy target. He's claimed supremacy over the airspace and signaled his readiness to escalate. So, Deepthi, this is a G7 summit that's actually taking place in the shadow of war clouds, quite literally.
Oh, absolutely. And what has Iran done? Over the last few minutes, you've seen a lot of these breaking updates that we here at NDTV have also covered, that Iran has gone ahead, even as Donald Trump is sitting in the Situation Room wanting to take a final call on whether he's going to exercise a military option and whether you will see US getting all out into this conflict. that you have the 10th wave of missiles that has been launched by Iran. The situation is clearly escalating, and reports say, Gauri, that the USA has also pushed in more troops into West Asia.
Absolutely. So what it looks like is a very worrisome situation where the global watchdog IAEA has also confirmed that Israeli airstrikes caused direct damage to the underground centrifuge halls at Iran's main nuclear facility. That's the Natanz facility, which is the main facility. So if a damage has been done, which is significant, that indicates Israel's ability to be able to knock out some of the nuclear facilities that Iran has. Also, it could be some sort of a vindication and validation of the kind of attacks that had started last week, which sort of pushed this entire region into kind of uncertainty and chaos it has. So at some level, that report is extremely important, Deepthi, because that is the kind of report that Donald Trump and his team would be looking at in terms of how they decide their next steps from here on.
Oh, yes. And what is Natanz? That is also, remember, that primary key facility. And this is a part of the nuclear program. That again has been the trigger. The real problem between Israel and Iran, and the US for the longest time has also, I mean, if you recall, Gauri, that there was an attempt by the Biden administration also to get a deal signed between the two. You've seen Donald Trump obviously wanting to push forward that, but this is significant. And on our screen, I think, are also multiple images that describe to you what is going on. Could there be a major escalation? We do not know. But in case there is, there are potential implications for both nuclear oversight, regional stability, as the Israel-Iran conflict, Gauri, could intensify.
Indeed, absolutely. And which is why that meeting that Deepthi was referring to is so important, where Donald Trump and his entire senior leadership are currently debating, discussing what should be the next steps. And let me get in Daniel, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C., Daniel Brock, to talk more about what could be the next steps in terms of the Trump administration's efforts to contain this. And we're also going to get Maha Siddiqui, who's joining us live from the G7 summit, covering that for us. Maha, I'm going to come to you in just a bit. This is a summit that's happening in the shadow of war clouds. Let me quickly get an update from Daniel first in terms of what Trump administration wants to do, more so since Trump decided to skip the summit altogether and go back early. Daniel.
So it's a great and important question. The answer right now is we're not really sure what Trump has decided to do. In fact, it's quite possible Trump himself hasn't decided what he wants to do. He sent mixed messages since this conflict began, including today. His most recent messages are quite bellicose and belligerent, but he's suggested earlier today as well, and his team has suggested that he's open to resuming diplomacy. So we're really kind of sitting on the edge. We don't know what way this is going to go. I think we do know, broadly speaking, that Trump does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And if that really is his guiding principle, his guiding force, he has a couple options before him. One is to bomb Iran, to join the Israeli strikes, to use the bunker-busting bombs that only the United States has to try and drill down deep and get rid of some of the enrichment facilities that Israel cannot target. The problem with that strategy is, while that may set back Iran's nuclear program by as many as a few years, it won't eliminate it entirely. You can't simply, I don't think, at least bomb Iran out of its nuclear program at this point in time. There's too much expertise in the country. There's too much knowledge. So that leads to another situation where you could imagine us entering a situation where the United States and Israel begin a regime change campaign against Iran, which would be a much bigger, much deadlier, much costlier, even than what we've seen so far, military option. And then the final option is to try diplomacy again, if that's still on the table, for Trump to hope that maybe the Israeli strikes give him some additional leverage against Iran, that he can get the Iranians back to the negotiating table, get the Israelis to stop the attacks and strike some sort of deal. What way we're going to go, we just don't know.
Right. I think Daniel is being pretty candid, Gauri. He says we don't know because no one knows what Donald Trump could be doing in the next few moments. But let me also quickly get in Maha here. Maha, people want to know that you have the G7 meeting. These are important world powers, but they're equally concerned about what's happening between Israel and Iran. And then you have Donald Trump, who decides to cut short that entire trip. And look at the kind of words that he has been using ever since. He says we dominates the Iranian airspace. He's speaking about the Iranian supreme leader, saying, you know, we know where he is. We are not killing him just yet, but he's under our radar. Has this cast a huge shadow already on G7?
Absolutely, Deepti. It has cast a huge shadow on the G7, and we saw that statement coming in from the G7 last evening here in Canada, where they backed Israel for its self-defense, is what they said, and also said that Iran will never have nuclear weapons. So, in a way, this was a means to get Donald Trump also to be on board that statement, considering Donald Trump had reservations about the usage of the word de-escalation. It is very tactically used in that statement. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron, this is also a very interesting point, because Emmanuel Macron was speaking over here and making a lot of people believe that the reason why President Trump is leaving the G7 and going back to Washington, D.C. earlier is because he wants to bring in a ceasefire. Although President Trump's statement on social media, that is on Truth Social, had already indicated that he did not have any such idea on his mind. And in fact, Donald Trump has now busted anything related to ceasefire by targeting Emmanuel Macron directly and saying that Emmanuel Macron got it wrong and that he did not leave for Washington, D.C. to push for a ceasefire with Iran. And now it's pretty clear, as the new post on social media indicates, that the U.S. is threatening Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, saying that they know his exact location. They do not want to kill him, take him out at the moment, but not ruling out that possibility either, because he's saying not for the moment. And this clearly is going to cast a shadow even on the final day of G7. We are going to see smaller statements being put out by the leaders, because this time the G7 doesn't have a full broad communique. They did not want one large communique to be held hostage, as it was the last time that the G7 was held in Canada, and Donald Trump had first signed and then taken back his consent to the G7 communique, calling the then Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, dishonest and weak with regards to the issue of tariff. This time, we are going to see those smaller statements come out in about an hour or so from now. We'll start hearing about those statements. So clearly, Deepti, this G7, as it was already being speculated that it could be derailed because of the geopolitical tensions, especially in the Middle East, in West Asia, and that's exactly what is happening.
I think these are very, very significant pointers, Maha, that you've brought forward. I'm just requesting you to stay with us. Daniel also continues to be with us as we'll take the story ahead, but I want to take it across to also our colleague Gauri, who's going to actually tell you who has said what. Remember, these are these war clouds over West Asia, and the world leaders are well apprised of it. These are significant points, Gauri. Why don't you take us through them?
Indeed, indeed, Deepti, this is a G7 summit that's actually taking place in the shadow of those war clouds. And I want to tell our viewers who has really said what in the last couple of hours to really understand that how significant this G7 summit could be. First, Donald Trump actually declined to sign the G7 draft because of the Israel-Iran conflict. And this is going to be a summit without an official declaration, without a communique, so to say, in the end. So that's very significant. Then after that, of course, Donald Trump went ahead and he cut short his visit. He's gone back. So again, unprecedented, without Trump being in any of these meetings. How significant will that really be? And his cutting short that visit means that some of these important meetings that were scheduled are now unlikely to yield any desired impact. Remember, G7 is an important grouping of nations where they try and find out roadmap and some sort of a strategic direction to big issues that are facing the world. Without the president of US being in those meetings, in those discussions, how significant will those be remains to be seen. Let's move ahead. Let's keep moving ahead. Benjamin Netanyahu also signaled that war is not over. So that is a very important aspect, because that has been the story, really, the underlying story and theme of this G7. French President Macron said that US-backed ceasefire is on the table. Again, very important, because this is an expectation of the West that America will try and broker some sort of a ceasefire there. Let's move ahead. The other aspect to that is that the German Chancellor also said that there are possibilities of some sort of talks that could take place. In fact, the German Chancellor said that he's ready to have those lines of communication open with Tehran. Donald Trump has rejected all such thoughts, all such possibilities whatsoever. Again, telling you how divided West has been in the G7. Let's move ahead. Let's keep moving ahead. Next is Prime Minister Modi has declared that this is not an era of war. Again, a very important fact, because at the end of the day, it is a body like G7 that can actually give a direction as to which way peace should actually be, what could be the defining line to try and identify the contours in which West Asia crisis needs to be understood and needs to be addressed by world leaders at a broader level. But this exactly is what has been happening in the last couple of hours, and that sets the stage and the context, Deepthi, of the kind of conversations that the world is hoping for G7 to have in the next couple of hours.
Oh yes, and what could be those conversations? Remember, like I said, no one likes a war. We know what's been happening vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine, and even India, remember, for the longest time has said that this is not an era of war. On your screens are multiple images, Gauri, that we'll keep playing out for our viewers to understand. But I want to go back to both Daniel and Maha, who have been getting us more updates and who are our best eyes and ears on ground. Daniel, what are your expectations? You're looking at very, very dramatic, big images that have been coming in as far as the G7 is concerned. Donald Trump not being a part of that right now, and Donald Trump rushing back to be on his home turf right now in the Situation Room in the White House. Could this derail the conversations, or you believe that this is going to be business as usual?
My sense is that this G7 was always going to be a bit atypical and a bit odd, both because Trump himself is back and Trump is a disruptor. Trump is somebody who has very, shall we say, unorthodox views about the United States' place and role in the world relative to previous US presidents, except, of course, from Trump himself. And so it was always going to be somewhat strange. And then you layer in the fact that this is happening against the backdrop of intensified war in the Middle East. That was always going to have an effect on it. So to what extent his absence from the conversation matters, I think it will have some effect. It will be harder for them to come out with sort of joint statements. As you've been noting rightfully on the broadcast, it'll be harder for them to come to some sort of diplomatic agreements. I always think that that was going to be difficult, though, given the personalities involved and given what's happening right now between Israel and Iran.
Absolutely. All right. Daniel, stay with us. I want to now welcome Meera Shankar, former diplomat, with us on the broadcast. Also, Dean Baxendale, who is a columnist, speaks regularly about the India-Canada relationship, something that's going to be in focus in this visit of the Prime Minister. Also, we have Brahmachilani as well as Jayajit Bhattacharya with us. Meera Shankar, let me start with you, ma'am. This is a summit that is the first foreign visit of the Prime Minister since Operation Sindoor. War clouds may be hovering over this summit, but from India's point of view, from Prime Minister Modi's point of view, this is the summit where he will be meeting world leaders for the first time since Operation Sindoor, putting India's policy, strategy, direction, all of it for world leaders in terms of how it wants to address cross-border terrorism and Pakistan-based terror outfits.
I think that will be an important issue on the agenda, but there are also many other important issues which are very compelling right now, including what is happening in West Asia between Iran and Israel. That is already dominating the G7, and then on Ukraine. And one thing that has become clear is that the G7 is now very divided, both over geopolitics as well as over economics. And that is as a result of the US shift in terms of how it sees its place in the world and how it seeks to build America first by unilateral tariffs, bringing a great deal of uncertainty to the global trading system. So this is not a united G7 which is taking place. But from India's point of view, it's important to see how these nuances play out and where the space is for India to try to build relations, to build a more multipolar world and create space for India. Of course, it's also important because the global economy is facing a slowdown in view of the economic uncertainties unleashed by by Trump's policies. Both the IMF and the World Bank have lowered their global forecasts for this year and possibly also for the next year. So that's important to see how countries can work together.
Okay.
Other countries can work together to ensure that trade flows don't get totally disrupted.
Okay,
so India is discussing...
Ambassador Shankar, I think you've put out some very, very good points as far as, we can take this conversation on. Dr. Jayjeet, before I come to you, with your permission, I want to get Brahmachalani also into this conversation. Brahmachalani, what is your assessment of what possibly could this G7 deliver? This is India that has used its own Modi doctrine when it came to the entire escalation vis-a-vis Pakistan. Now you see Iran and Israel. Israel also for the longest time has been fighting its own war on terror. And when it comes to terror, I think what Ambassador Shankar actually spoke about is very important, national interest. Everyone is speaking for their self-interest. And that is why perhaps many say that this is a G7 that is divided like never before. What is your take?
The G7 is divided because of rising protectionism in the West. But look at the irony. The G7 was set up as the forum of the leading economies of the world. But India is now the fourth largest economy, is set to become the third largest economy. It is still only a special invitee to the G7. The G7's relevance in international relations is on the decline. The G20 has become the premier international economic forum, not the G7. But the G7 leaders still pretend that they can run the world. So that's the paradox. And I think India's presence at the G7 summit reinforces India's role as a global player. It helps to advance India's global position. After all, there can be no discussions on international issues, including global supply chains or trade negotiations, without India being present. But this meeting of the G7 is being held at a pivotal moment for global diplomacy. We have multiple conflicts and crises in the world. Ukraine, now the Israel-Iran war. Taiwan is a potential flashpoint. So today, at this critical juncture, when Prime Minister Khani is hosting this meeting, and he, as we all know, that he invited Modi at the 11th hour.
Yes.
A decision that for which he has faced flack at home. But the reason why he invited Modi was primarily because Canada's economy is stagnating.
I'll tell you why, sir. Brahmachalani, I'll tell you why Canada, or for that matter, Mark Carney's invitation to India, to Prime Minister Modi, was so very important. And in fact, there are I would probably say five clear reasons why India needs to be on that high table. First, it is the growth engine that's powering powering the world economy. The average of the G7 countries in terms of their economic growth is sub 2%. You take away India, then what is the kind of growth prospects that you're looking at for these countries going forward? It's also the voice of the global South. It's also the one that is talking about peace in times of war. India is also the country that has deep linkages, whether in terms of climate finance, whether it's in terms of AI, whether in terms of technology. So there are a whole host of reasons, the reason why India is and needs to be on that table. But I have one question which I want to ask Dr. Bhattacharya here, which is that while we are talking about a divided G7, and Deepti, this is one of the most important aspects, that this is a G7 which is divided both on the political aspect as well as on the trade side. Nobody wants to be partnering Trump when it comes to those trade tariffs. But they're not picking up that bone because they have the war clouds hovering over the world right now. But Dr. Bhattacharya, I want to understand from you, how much of a direction do you think, or a roadmap do you think this G7 summit could provide on the trade and the economic aspect, which is equally important?
I'll pick up on the words that you used, that G7 seems to be divided. I think in this particular meeting, what will probably emerge is a G6 plus one kind of a grouping, and that plus one is US. In the G7 GDP, if you put the whole GDP of G7 countries together, US is almost 70%, if not more, than the total GDP of the 7 countries. And therefore, as we see US careening out and creating a significant amount of friction, not just in terms of economics, not just in terms of trade, but also in terms of what is the geopolitical stance that US is taking vis-a-vis the rest of the 6 countries. In the past, they've always been aligned. They've been largely aligned in the past. But this is the first time that we are seeing that US is taking a path which is very difficult for the rest of the 6 countries to follow. So I think one of the clear outcomes of this G7 would be the formation of a G6 plus 1 kind of a grouping, where it's US plus the other 6 countries. And I also think it's time that G7 starts expanding. I think by the time the next meeting happens, we'll probably have G7 plus 1 or 2 coming in. It's also interesting to see the countries which refused the invitation that was extended to them to come and attend the G7 meeting. This was Saudi Arabia, this was UAE, this was Indonesia. So it's important to see and try and understand why these countries, and these are also powerhouses. Indonesia is also a significantly large economy.
Okay.
It has got a huge population. Why did they not come for the G7 meeting? It kind of demonstrates that the G7 as a body is kind of waning in terms of its power. It's a clear geopolitical indication that it's waning in its influence that it used to have on the rest of the world.
Okay, because this is a world that is changing. And then you have Donald Trump, the unpredictability, Gauri, of a Donald Trump, where he's only and only talking about tariff, about trade, something that both Ambassador Shankar and Brahmachalani also alluded towards, Dr. Bhattacharya. And we also do have Maha, who's back with us. But before we go to Maha, I want to get a quick word from Ambassador Shankar here, because we are looking at a lot of other things at play in this world that is no longer bipolar, the world that is obviously not unipolar, but everyone has their own interest. But when it comes to terror, Ambassador Shankar, would it be fair to say that you will have all these world powers condemning terror, but when it comes to acting against terror, we hardly see that?
I think, again, this has been the traditional pattern that the world has taken much more notice of terrorism against the developed countries than against the developing countries. And much of the, challenge that India has faced is a challenge that India has faced alone, because we haven't really had that much support or sympathy. And, they tend to see it as some kind of bilateral issue, which it isn't. And much of it is also a consequence of the West's policies, because, the backwash from the Afghan war impacted a lot of countries, including India, with all those militant groups who had been set up, the jihadi groups, and turning their attention to other objectives, including, say, for instance, non-Muslim countries with Muslim minorities. So this has been something which India has been stressing, that you can't have a differentiated approach where one terrorist is not so bad as another terrorist, because that terrorist is, targeting the developed world, and another can be ignored.
Absolutely.
Because it's targeting a developing country. And I think that's a message we have to continue to take to the world.
And I think, Ambassador Shankar, that message will come across today when the Prime Minister holds those bilaterals and those important meetings with the world leaders at the G7 summit. Let me go back to Maha, who continues to be with us. Maha, now talk to us about what are the kind of engagements that are lined up today. It's a short visit of the Prime Minister, less than 24 hours, but there's a working lunch. It's going to be focused on energy security. Tell us what all is lined up today, the itinerary, and what can we expect?
Yes, absolutely. The Prime Minister is going to be participating in that session that you just mentioned, Gauri, but that's a little later in the day. At the moment, there is a photograph of all the invited countries, the leaders with the G7 countries, after which the Prime Minister is going to hold bilateral meetings with at least two countries, one with the German Chancellor, another expected one is with the Mexican side. However, all eyes are keenly trained on the bilateral meetings that Prime Minister Modi will hold later in the day. That is with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, and the final one with the host country, that is the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. That really is the main meeting that all eyes are keenly trained on because of the friction that the two countries have seen over the last 2 years since 2023. The invitation for the G7 summit sent by Prime Minister Mark Carney to Prime Minister Modi was just a week ahead of the G7. But he made a call to the Prime Minister inviting him for the summit, and the Prime Minister accepted that invitation even though it came just a week earlier. And this is being seen as a positive move by experts and even by the general public, especially the Indian diaspora here in Canada.
Yes, because I want to quickly address those live visuals that are coming in.
Yes.
Those are live visuals. Let's take that full frame, please. Those are live visuals coming in of the G7 summit. There you can see UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. You also have the German Chancellor. That will be his first G7 visit that will take place in Alberta. They are at a very scenic resort, Deepthi, in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. You can see the European Council President also, Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the French President Emmanuel Macron. He had a bit of a spat with Donald Trump on social media regarding the Iran-Israel conflict. But those are latest and updated visuals that are coming in right now.
Oh yes, and our team tells us we have to take a very quick break. So what we'll do is we'll quickly dip into one, but with a promise that we are coming back with these live images, the best analysis, and yes, we are also live looking at what's happening between Israel and Iran. Do not go anywhere on the other side of this quick break.
From the echo of the Trump tariffs to the geopolitical tensions in West Asia. And on the sidelines, a possible thaw in the frosty relations between India and Canada. I will bring you all the latest updates from the Kananaskis G7 Summit. NDTV, live from the G7 Summit in Canada.
How often have you turned away from debates that descend into endless fights? We bring you a show where every question is answered, where every debate finds its resolution, where every story finds its conclusion, where opinions collide but facts prevail, where stories unfold with insights and trust. When the noise ends, the last word begins.
If it matters to you, if it matters to you, if it matters to you, it matters to India. It matters to India. And it matters to me. And it matters to me.
India Matters with Shivaru. Only on NDTV 24/7.
I've been reporting on all issues big and small from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of maximum city is infectious. I'm bringing that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti, also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
All All right. Welcome, viewers. You're watching NDTV's special coverage of the G7 summit. I'm Gauri Dwivedi, and Deepthi and I are going to be taking you through all the latest updates of the G7 summit. Prime Minister Modi has arrived there, and on your screens are those live images and visuals coming in. On your screens right now is the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and he seems to be in deep conversation with the European Council President Ursula von der Leyen.
Oh yes, and I'm wondering what are these conversations really centered around right now, Gauri, and I think you should be able to tell us this. We talk about a lot of energy solutions, climate change, all these things that are real. Then there is trade, there is tariff, there is multilateralism. People talk about just one world, common interest. But when you look at all these leaders sitting across, talking to each other, what really weighs on their minds, especially at a point where you've seen Donald Trump, Gauri, just moving out of that G summit rather very quickly. He lands in Washington, he rushes to the White House. In the Situation Room, he's having a conversation right now. And obviously, the world wants to know what will he do next on Israel and Iran. But what about the G7?
Indeed, on one end, everyone is waiting for the update that will come in from the Trump administration in terms of what will be the big American decision on Iran and Israel. But the visuals on your screens, Deepthi, you have the French president talking. He was also had a verbal spat a short while back. Not a spat, so to say, but he was being corrected by Donald Trump. And frankly, going into this summit, there was a lot of expectation that the divisions in the West may probably come out in the front even more, simply because it was looking like Trump against all. Well, frankly, that isn't now going to be a spectacle that we will be seeing simply because Donald Trump made an early exit. But it also puts into question that some of the discussions and deliberations that this summit is supposed to take place, whether it's on climate finance, whether it's on energy, whether it's on the roadmap with regard to how to address wars and conflicts in 21st century, and also the fact, how do you address aggressors like Russia when you have Donald Trump actually making a case that Russia should be back in G7 to make it G8. So in the backdrop of those important set of developments coming in, it will be very interesting to see what will be the actual outcome of this summit.
Oh yes, and this is the group of 7, that is G7 that we are talking about, an informal grouping of the world's most advanced economies. Which really are these economies? It is France, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, Italy and Canada, and the European Union. Its members, remember, meet annually at the G7 summit. The idea is to discuss global economic and geopolitical issues. And this is where, Gauri, India also comes into the picture. India, that is already the 5th largest economy in the world, has regularly been invited to this outreach session of the G7 summit in the past few years. And India and its growing heft is again something that cannot be ignored at the high table. And you were telling us more about those reasons, those numbers, Gauri.
Absolutely, Deepthi. And as we speak, India has actually climbed to be the 4th largest economy. And as I said, it's the world's biggest growth engine. So how can this grouping of the 7 most industrialized countries on the planet not have the world's growth engine being part of it to decide and discuss the future roadmap? Also, India as the voice of the global south. When India speaks, it's not just speaking about itself, it's speaking for the global south, which is 3/4 of humanity. Let's not forget, India has been pushing and championing the cause of developing and least developed countries. And let me in fact rope in both Sanjay Ruparelia, who's joining us, as well as Tara Kartha to talk more about what could be the kind of expectations that both of you have with regard to the G7. It's unlikely to have the fireworks that many thought it would have, with Donald Trump coming face to face with his Western allies in the backdrop of all that he has said, including with the host country himself. But that is unlikely to take place. But it's happening in the backdrop of war clouds that are threatening to overshadow the entire summit's agenda. Tara Kartha, let me start with you. How much do you think this G7 is now going to be focused solely on the Iran-Israel conflict that is becoming bigger as we speak?
I don't see how they can possibly put that aside. I mean, that's not just a moral imperative. We're not talking morals here. We're talking of, this is an economic grouping, right? So the Europe, as a percentage of GDP in the G7 countries, Europe's share has dropped hugely. The G7 as a whole, in terms of their GDP, has dropped. I think now it's about 45% of the world economy. Earlier it was some 60%. So war has an economic impact. And so does the Ukraine war. Of course, the Ukraine war is going on at the same time. So the necessity of getting this terrible war to stop is going to be one. Number two is how to get, to get the whole US, the whole tariff structures which are going on, the war. There is a virtual trade war which is going on. That is going to be a problem. Given this background of higher defense spending by all these countries. I think that the figure which they gave is 17% jump in defense spending in European countries, including Russia. That's the largest since the Cold War. So how are you going to balance all of this? You've got war, you've got a slowing economy, and you've got rising defense expenditures. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, where we come in. We've got, hopefully, thank God, this kind of problems will affect us as an economy. You cannot divorce yourself from the world economy. And I think with the Prime Minister, it has always been, from the time he came, the economy is his central point. And let's see how that works within this clique.
Okay. I think Tara makes a lot of important points. And I'm just looking at a lot of these accounts of Donald Trump on the social media also. I think we also do see Kathleen, who's an immigration expert, joining us. Kathleen, also thank you to you for your time. Sanjay, Donald Trump a little while earlier has put out a tweet that says unconditional surrender. Clearly as you're looking at the G7 right now meeting, in deep conversations, looking at how else you can fix the geopolitical situation and much more. But we cannot take away from the fact that you have to look at a resolution to what's been happening between Iran and Israel. And Donald Trump not being a part of the G7 tonight, do you think that possibly could derail that conversation, or it's going to be business as usual?
Well, that certainly dominated the conversation unexpectedly since Israel launched that attack. And I think we've seen from the Trump administration it has sided with Netanyahu's government for quite some time, preceding his re-election in January and since then. So I think that's going to dominate it. And the statement that's been issued so far has been quite muted. It's asked for de-escalation. So it doesn't mention who began this attack. It calls out Iran as the main source of regional instability. This is the perspective of the G7. And then it ends on a note, as your previous speaker was talking about, which is the concern over the impact on the price of oil. 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil trade goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And in previous instances, Iran has been able to crimp that movement. And so I think that's been the main concern. All of these countries are battling concerns around inflation, cost of living. It's one of the main reasons why Prime Minister Carney focused on the economy in particular in this G7 meeting. And we see that in terms of the invitees that he made beyond the G7.
Indeed, that is also the NATO Secretary General who's there on the screens. Let's take some of those, continue to take those visuals full frame as we wait for some of the other leaders to also join in. Formal photo ops will also take place. Viewers, if you're tuning in right now, what you're seeing on your screens are live visuals that are coming in from Canada, where the 50th G7 summit is being held. On your screens is UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in conversation with the European Council President Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the NATO Secretary General as well. They are, of course, talking about the war clouds that are hovering. Also, the fact that they were hoping that Russia-Ukraine conflict could be on the agenda, but that's unlikely to be, because Donald Trump feels that Russia should be, in fact, part of this grouping, and it should go back to being G8, which it was till 2014, and also B, because, Israel-Iran is the larger conflict that needs to be addressed. And Diti, that's really the big thing, right? I mean, while we talk about that some of the summit outcomes may be not as significant as one would have ideally hoped it to be, but at the end of the day, this is a grouping that is set to decide the roadmap that the world should take, especially of a conflict as significant as Iran-Israel. And as some of the panelists were pointing out, it could have a deep impact on the supply lines and sea routes for the world.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And because we've promised our viewers that we are going to keep our eyes focused not just on what's been happening as far as G7 is concerned and these live images, but also on the latest vis-a-vis Iran and Israel situation. We are learning of a massive blast that has hit Western Tehran, and also the Iranian defense system has been activated to intercept Israeli attacks. All this happening as you have Donald Trump in the White House in the Situation Room. So we are live and breaking on both those stories, both those images already up on your screens. I want to also get in a quick word with Kathleen, who hasn't spoken yet. Kathleen, in the light of whatever's been going on, when you talk about Donald Trump, immigration again is one of the core issues that he does speak about. You see a lot of action. You know, different world capitals have different opinions on how to deal with this issue. What, in your sense, possibly could be a point of convergence as far as all these growing economies are concerned?
Well, I would say this is going to be a positive, a positive wave in the immigration industry, wherein we are able to do the conversions now. And as soon as the new PM, the new Prime Minister came in charge of Canada, we were able to convert more people towards Canada, wherein all these people, all these chunk of people, they were wanted to migrate to Australia and Germany and via Europe. But now, as we see, they have introduced new policies, 19C bill. There is a new introduction of a postgraduate work permit. Now people are really happy. And of course, since India is a cornerstone of talent, and we do have a lot of people filled with talent, especially techies, healthcare. And that is the reason we have a wider road to get through our permanent residencies and also get through immigration as very smoothly.
Absolutely.
So, this is absolutely a positive wave for us.
Indeed, Kathleen, and immigration as such is likely to be a big issue simply because you have this rising tide of right-wing thought that is sweeping most of Europe right now, where they feel, in fact, even Keir Starmer has come out with some very strong, stringent views and visa norms that have a huge impact on immigrants, including Indians that have been impacted, whether it's the students or several other immigrant categories have been deeply impacted. So remains to be seen if there is any direction or view that's coming in on that front as well. We have to take a very short break, viewers. We come back with our big focus, big coverage on the G7 summit, where Prime Minister Modi is there. It's a short 23-hour summit. First time he's in Canada in 10 years. This is a visit that will reboot the India-Canada relationship. We're going to come back and talk more on that. Stay with us.
The markets move fast.
And so should your portfolio. Expert insights, real-time stock picks.
Do I buy Ola?
Should I hold CDSL for the long term?
Buy, sell or hold.
The answers you need, straight from the experts.
Callers from India and across the world. Connect live, ask, decide and invest wisely.
Your portfolio, your future. Ask Profit.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora, we cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news, is here.
The last 1 month, if you see, the share prices of Genzol Engineering has fallen more than 58%.
Why are the rating firms calling the debt payments as default?
We have two credible credit rating agencies on March 4th coming and downgrading the stock to D.
Statements are consistently being proven wrong, and transactions are being taken place which are different from what they were originally pictured to be.
The company claimed it would roll out 6,400 electric vehicles.
Welcome back. So this is a special non-stop rolling coverage on the all-important G7 that's just going to get kick-started. On your screen are multiple live images that we are getting in as far as the summit is concerned, and a lot of world leaders right now also looking at the other situation that is developing. What's happening between Iran and Israel? You have Donald Trump, who decides to exit the G7 suddenly. He lands up back on his home turf. He's in the Situation Room, and we'll keep getting you all those updates. But for the moment, I want to take it across to our colleague Gauri, who will tell us what is expected. What are the important bilaterals, Gauri, that we are looking at? It's going to be a power-packed day there, and the Prime Minister spending about 23 hours. But every moment, I think, of that time is devoted to a lot of these important conversations.
Absolutely, Deepthi. There are about 4 or 5 very important bilaterals that are scheduled that will take place between Prime Minister Modi and several of the other world leaders. And I want to quickly take our viewers through what exactly is it that are lined up. First, of course, the most important bilateral that is set to take place is with the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. It is going to be the last, but it is going to be the most important. This is going to act as a possible thaw in the ties between India and Canada that were in deep freeze during Justin Trudeau's tenure. People-to-people ties are likely to get a big boost, because that will happen when the PMs, Prime Minister Modi and his Canadian counterpart, are going to meet for the first time. So there's going to be some sort of a rapport building that will take place between the two leaders, and that's when the ties will really move ahead, because let's not forget they also have a common interest, and that is trade. Economic ties are going to be in focus. Mark Carney may be a political newcomer, but he's someone who's spent a lifetime in finance and banking, so he understands the importance of trade ties right now, more so at a time when Donald Trump's tariffs have really threatened and upended the entire global economic order. Both India and Canada have shared economic interests, and they would like to put that forward more so with the meeting. And just before we move ahead, I want to quickly tell our viewers the kind of trade ties that exist between them, which is upwards of about $9 billion. Let's move ahead. This is an important meeting as well. Prime Minister Modi will be meeting Giorgia Meloni of Italy, the Italian Prime Minister. The focus will be on trade, as well as specific collaboration with regard to space and technology, areas where they have already identified the last time they met at the last multilateral summit. And there will also be a lot of focus on IMEC. The India, Middle East, Europe corridor is something that India is very ambitious about, and Italy joins it on that. So that's another area that will be extremely important. Let's move ahead to the other bilateral that will be extremely important, which is Germany. This is going to be the first meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chancellor Merz, and they will look to build on the kind of business ties that India and Germany have. Trade is a very important pillar on which the bilateral relationship stands. Indo-Pacific cooperation is the other, where both leaders would like to further build on it. And lastly, Ukraine. That's the fourth other important bilateral. Focus will be on the humanitarian support that India is going to continue to offer to Ukraine. And secondly, Prime Minister Modi is likely to reiterate India's continued balanced position when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. In addition to this, there is also a possibility of a bilateral with the Mexican president, who's another invitee to the G7 summit. If that happens, that will be the fifth and equally important bilateral that will take place today. Deepthi.
All right, significant details there that Gauri has been able to share with us. And like they say, when it comes to the world stage, every country will have its own interest. Every country needs to ensure that back home they are able to sell a perception that, yes, we are thinking about you. But when it comes to broader issues, whether it's about trade, it's about tariff, it is about climate change and a lot of other things, remember, this is where you see a lot of convergence on world powers. For the moment, I want to take it back to Sanjay, to Tara Kartha and to Kathleen, who've been patient enough as they've stayed with us in that coverage. Tara, to you. Simultaneously, you're looking at this evolving situation between Israel and Iran. When it came to Russia and Ukraine, India was unequivocal. India said that this is not the era of war. Even right now, India has some fantastic relationships with both Israel and Iran, whether it is about economy, whether it is military, whether it's even cultural relations. So at a point like this, I think the Prime Minister will also be looking at what happens and what could Donald Trump do, perhaps in the next few days to the next few weeks.
Well, I'm just saw this flashing on your screen that Trump has said no to assassinating Khomeini, which is a relief, right? I mean, that's not the way you want to go. Hopefully, it's not going to happen. But what's complicating our position on Iran is the fact that there are Chinese aircraft arriving in Tehran. You know, there is a very clear China, that new railroad, the rail link has just been launched some time back. The first cargo has arrived. So that link is probably going to complicate how we're going to play this, though our friendship on a bilateral basis, we have very, very good relations with Iran. But like I said, Gauri, what I was trying to say is, you know, when you're talking of this whole rise of right wing, you know, this whole trend is driven when the world economy starts shrinking, when there is an immense amount of stress on it. And that is where we are going to focus as a leader of the global south. Because inevitably, the costs of war are the highest on the global south. And this, by the way, is incidentally, I mean, just off the cuff, is also a concern of China. They don't want you to be seen as a leader of this. And so they're going to be watching what you do at the G7 with a magnifying glass. I think last year I think they were even looked at where Mr. Modi was standing in photographs. I mean, they go to that extent. So the importance of this in terms of how things are going to play out in Asia is very important.
And I want to now quickly turn attention to some of those bilaterals and most importantly the one between Prime Minister Modi and PM Mark Carney. And Sanjay Ruparelia, let me ask you this, that in terms of expectations for this visit, there are a lot of expectations. It will be the first meeting between the two prime ministers. They're looking to sort of start afresh, so to say, ensure that there is a thaw in their relations, build a certain rapport. That's the kind of expectation. How do you see that meeting? What would be your takeaways? What is it that you would expect from this bilateral visit and bilateral meeting?
Well, I think, as you said, it's the beginning of a reset. The Indo-Canadian relations have been in a crisis and an impasse for the last 2 years. And so there's going to be sort of two sets of issues. One is to bilaterally, I don't think we'll have any statement on that, but to look at the dispute that has caused this impasse. And there's an ongoing police investigation into these disputes to do with events that have happened. And then there's a question about trying to expand trade and defense cooperation, looking at critical minerals, for instance, and so on. So I think what we're seeing is a sort of two-track process. Prime Minister Carney did receive a lot of protests by certain members in civil society, Sikh organizations, the NDP itself, some members of his own party. But he is very much a pragmatist when it comes to being prime minister, as he said, and the watchword has been the economy. So I think they're going to try to reset this. They understand how important the relationship is for both countries, certainly for Canada. We were mentioning Indian students earlier. Indian students are the largest segment of the international student body in Canada. There have been caps imposed in the last couple of years for various reasons. But I can see that, you know, that the people-to-people ties have been very important. So I think it was a contentious invitation. It was a last-minute one that came through. But as the Prime Minister here said, it was inevitable because of the size and scope and importance of India in the global economy. And there's a real attempt to see if we can reset that relationship. So I think that's the background.
Thing that Mark Carney will have to address, which is the Khalistani terrorists and Khalistani terrorism that continue to exist on Canadian soil.
But, you know, Gauri, would it be fair to say that these are, you know, rather distractions? Because at the end of this, you know, India time and again has made it very, very clear that these are our red lines. And Tara, you would also agree, so would Sanjay and Kathleen, that these are red lines that India has stuck to. We do not care about who's ruling Canada. We are more concerned about issues that affect us. And, you know, you cannot let that Khalistani terrorism perhaps emanate from your soil, believe that it can give you cushion for power, and we've seen how that entire story has actually collapsed.
Yes.
But Kathleen, why don't you come in on the point not just of immigration, but the fact that for the longest time, a lot of people in Delhi and elsewhere actually viewed the G7 and a lot of these European powers also as a monolith. Now, a lot of things have changed. as far as then and now are concerned. And you're looking at India obviously gaining its heft, and India today will be speaking from a position of authority.
Yes, I mean, after what has happened in the past in Ontario with our Indian students, most of the Indian students and the immigrants, the skilled workers, were routed towards Europe and Australia. Being an immigration expert, because we do the filing and we know that how people are coming, and they were hesitant to go ahead with Canada, even if they were fully eligible, and the points, whatever the point system was as per the Canadian immigration laws and regulation, even though they were eligible, they were taking their applications back. But now this is a positive wave, and now I'm using it for my clients as well. And I would say that it is easier to convert these people, because with a very heavy heart, these people used to take an option, Germany or any country in the Europe or Australia. But having said that, they have their own community there in Canada. They have their distant relative already staying there. Knowing the fact that this is going to happen with them in the longer run, that is the reason they, people, the Indian families, they try and say, Kathleen, we would like to route ourselves to other countries, not Canada. But now, as we say that, we do not have anything to do with the new PM, but we really say that, and we are not in the favor of Khalistanis, and we're not in the favor of terrorism.
Right.
Already we have proven.
Right.
With
in fact, Kathleen, stay with us. I'm going to slip into a very short break and come back and talk more on this Khalistani terrorism issue, something that deeply impacted the India-Canada ties. The onus lies now on Mark Carney to fix it. How he will do, we'll come back and talk more on that. Stay with us.
News is not just headlines, it is what impacts you. And news should never be mistaken for noise. What matters is the reality. Accurate, in-depth, and with the right perspective. For over 20 years, I have been a journalist, and never has clarity mattered more than now. At Newsnight, we go beyond the surface. We dissect the details, challenge the narratives, and bring you the unparalleled clarity you deserve in a world clouded by misinformation. We are bold, we are direct. Newsnight, for the news in your interest. Only on NDTV 24/7.
Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad, India's latest aviation disaster. India responds to the tragedy. Facts first, 100% ground reports.
Under this is the tail,
Here, and this is just one of the buildings that will give you an idea of the quantum of loss.
24 to 48 hours is the deadline that has been given for the DNA testing.
Maximum reporters, maximum coverage on NDTV.
Why was there a hurry? Was it the government that was in a hurry?
I don't want to blame anyone.
Joining us today here in the NDTV newsroom.
The government cannot walk away from this responsibility.
Cricket is region of sort in this country.
Would you like to comment on what happened?
What is the condition of the injured at this point? How many people died?
What exactly happened? You have lost your daughter.
If it matters to you, if it matters to you, if it matters to you,
Welcome viewers, you're watching our rolling coverage of the G7 summit. Prime Minister Modi is at the G7 summit. This is the 50th summit of the G7 grouping taking place in Canada, where the PM is there for 23 hours. His first visit in a decade comes at a time when there's expectation of a thaw in relationships. He is going to also be meeting several leaders in quick bilaterals, Deepthi, and that is likely to take place soon. Some of that has already begun, is what we are getting to know. And we have those live visuals that are coming in. Let's put that out as well, of the leaders attending some of these meetings ahead of the G7 summit that will begin in about, the leadership summit that will begin in about an hour from now. Deepthi, some updates, some details that are trickling in as we speak.
Oh, yeah. So, we must tell our viewers, Gauri, and you can actually push that point a little further. A lot of these are scheduled visits, but then you also have a lot of these pull-aside conversations that happen, because this is important when you have world leaders meeting, and at a time like this where you're looking at a lot of global changes happening, there are a lot of power dynamics that are underplay. Then you have a Donald Trump, and we have to talk about Donald Trump because he's someone who decided to quickly exit the G7 earlier. As we speak, we also do know that there is a briefing expected from the White House very, very shortly. There has been a meeting in the Situation Room, so we are keeping you abreast also of that important story that is developing parallelly. And on your screens are images of earlier where you had seen Donald Trump landing in Washington, and he's been active on his social media, Gauri, and he's speaking of a quote-unquote an unconditional surrender. So that really tells you where this tone and tenor is taking us. And I'm sure all these world leaders who are right now at the G7 obviously are going to be speaking about this.
Absolutely.
There are those world powers who stand with Iran, those with Israel, but no one wants an escalation for sure, Gauri.
Absolutely. G7 summit taking place in the backdrop of the war clouds. And as Deepthi was pointing out, the reason why Donald Trump went back early, he's holding meeting with his senior advisors. And what's flashing viewers at the bottom of your screens right now is the first pull aside that has taken place between Prime Minister Modi and the Mexican president. Pull aside is a more unstructured meeting as compared to a formal bilateral meeting that takes place. A pull aside allows leaders to be able to discuss several issues in a more free manner. Of course, talking points and topics are discussed and shared much in advance. Ambassador D.P. Srivastava also joins us on the broadcast. As we speak, first pull aside has taken place between Prime Minister Modi and the Mexican president. It's important since this comes at a time, Ambassador Srivastava, there's been an expectation that while Trump tariffs may not dominate the G7 summit this time around because there are war clouds, but the fact is trade has been a major issue that is likely to bind some of these leaders that are coming together and is likely to dominate the conversation between Prime Minister Modi and the Mexican president.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Tariff issue has plagued much of the G7 as well as major economies like India. And Mexico and India have similar positions. Mexico, in fact, was closer to US. It was, they had a free trade agreement. In our case, we didn't have a free trade agreement, but we have very close political relations. And I think this bilateral meeting will help better understanding of each other's position as well as how we go forward, because individual deals with different countries cannot be substitute for a multilateral system.
All right, let's quickly rope in Maha as well on this. Maha, as we speak, pull asides are taking place. One with the Mexican president has taken place, Claudia Sheinbaum, and the second one with the South Korean president is also underway. Talk us through what could be some of the highlights of these pull aside conversations.
Well, these pull asides certainly important considering that these are the countries which are critical at the moment as far as the issues related to tariffs and trade is concerned, Gauri. As you know, Mexico too is suffering at the hands of President Trump with serious tariff and trade issues. At this moment, at this juncture, for countries to align or realign countries to realign with other trading partners certainly becomes an important issue. And in that context, India's meetings, even pull-aside meetings with countries like Mexico and South Korea, become very significant and important. But Gauri, as we pointed out, the biggest bilateral meetings, or the most important ones, most significant ones, will come a little later in the day when the Prime Minister sits down for a structured meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. That is the last one of the day today. And before that, President Zelensky as well, where he'd be talking about the ongoing conflict, of course, that continues in Ukraine. Apart from that, the issue of the geopolitical tensions that are only growing from Russia to Ukraine. Now we are looking at the flaring up of the situation in West Asia. All these are critical issues, and they will be touched upon in these meetings because they have a ripple effect, not just on the geopolitical situation and tension, but also a ripple effect on trade, economics, and the global economy that has suffered a jolt only 5 years ago during the COVID-19 pandemic. And now this geopolitical situation around the world makes it difficult for countries to recover from the losses of COVID-19 pandemic. These are some of the highlights at the moment. The morning photo session, the family photo session of the invited leaders with the G7 countries is over. But Gauri, as you and Deepthi have been discussing, the big issue really for the G7 at the moment remains the Israel-Iran conflict, which is only threatening to escalate further.
Oh, yes. I think Maha also underscores a lot of these important points. Kathleen continues to stay with us, and we also do have Ambassador Srivastava. But I want to get in another quick word with Maha before we go back to our team of guests. And we must tell our viewers that a lot of the breaking updates, remember, are already flashing on your screens. You know, Maha, if I'm not wrong, South Korea again is one country that was touched by the entire diplomatic effort that India unleashed after Operation Sindoor. And this is the Prime Minister's very first big appearance at the G7 post that Operation Sindoor, where India has drawn its own red lines when it comes to terror. And that, I think, is equally significant and worth talking about.
Yes, absolutely, Deepthi. In fact, if you see Prime Minister's departure statement when he left for the three-nation visit, which included Canada as the second stop for the G7 summit, the last paragraph of that departure statement clearly mentions that these visits are also very closely linked to the issue of terrorism and the red line, as you're mentioning, India has drawn on that issue. It is important to take into loop as many countries for diplomatic reasons as possible. And in that context, in fact, the visit before Canada, the one to Cyprus, was very significant, considering that Cyprus has ongoing disputes with Turkey, and Turkey had taken a stand which was pro-Pakistan. And therefore, the fact that India or Prime Minister Modi went to Cyprus, the first visit in 2 decades, only the third in since India became independent, were all also very significant. And clearly, the Prime Minister will use the G7 platform, not just the Prime Minister alone. The entire delegation will also significantly use the G7 platform to drive that message through in these pull-aside and bilateral meetings.
Absolutely. Mahar, stay with us. We're going to keep coming back to you as updates coming in. The pull-asides that Deepthi was referring to, that's flashing on our screens, are underway, first with the Mexican president, then with the South Korean president. And Ambassador Srivastava, this is the big diplomatic power play of India that is on display here at the G7, something that we've been talking about, why India needs to be at the G7, because A, it's a big economic heavyweight that's driving the world economy, and B, this is also allowing India to be at the center stage of global politics, with the Prime Minister Modi pretty much at the center of it.
Indeed, G7 is important, and so is India. In fact, if you look at it in the larger perspective, India is the only major economy which has a GDP growth rate of 6.5%. None of the G7 countries can match that. Of course, the GDP of US and China and Japan is higher than us. But it is as much in their interest to engage with India and Prime Minister has taken time off from his busy schedule to meet the G7 leaders and also other leaders who have been invited to the summit as part of the outreach, like you just mentioned, South Korea. These leaders have such a busy schedule that these multilateral events provide them with an opportunity to meet, which otherwise, the schedule would not permit.
Absolutely.
So,
With South Korea, there are also a lot of technology ties that are there. Semiconductor is a very important aspect of the India-South Korea relationship. That is likely to be a part of these conversations. Technology sharing, semiconductor being part of it. And also, let's not forget, South Korea also has deep linkages in the global supply chain. If India wants to be a player at that level, it needs to have linkages with countries like South Korea, and that I think is going to be some of the conversations dominating that polar sides. Deepti.
Oh yes, Kathleen, we've been talking of a lot of other issues. Immigration is one issue that we keep going back to, keeping in mind that it does affect a lot of world capitals, and then you have Donald Trump at the center of that conversation, Kathleen. Considering what we are seeing the world moving towards, it is very, very fluid and everyone obviously looking at their interest. Do you believe that that could still drive a lot of this international conversation when you will have the world leaders sitting and talking?
Yes. I'll tell you one thing, because let's talk about Canada and US both. So when when all these clients used to come, the main goal was to get entry to the US in a cakewalk, right? They don't want to get through with big visas appointment wherein they have to wait for almost 3 to 6 months time to get their appointments. But here, when you apply for Canadian permanent residency based on your skill sets, your age, education, work experience, and language, of course, you also have the right to work and settle in the US. That was the one factor. And this was the reason people were really keen towards Canada. First, they had their own community there. Second was to get an entrance to the US. But now, after Donald Trump, what is happening. I don't want to, highlight it again. It is again going to be a big issue, and I do think that they are going to discuss this for sure.
All right, slipping into a very short break. We come back on the other side, continue our rolling coverage of the G7 summit, 50th such summit taking place in Canada at a time when war clouds are hovering over the entire Middle East. Will that dominate the conversation, or will there be several other issues that the G7 summit would be able to achieve in the absence of Donald Trump? We come back and talk more on that. Stay with us.
Is your business future ready? Join the 13-week strategic ESG certification program for business sustainability and growth for CXO and business leaders by NDTV, Terry and Zenora. Master global ESG frameworks, gain real-world tools, and lead with impact. Starts July 13th. Enroll now and power your business with sustainability.
As the Iran-Israel war escalates, Indian students in the crossfire.
As soon as possible evacuate kiya jaye.
War zone worries grip parents. The next Indian mass evacuation ahead. NDTV at Ground Zero. Three days after the Air India crash, a desperate wait for DNA tests, agonizing wait for identity, the fight for dignity in death, doctors knee-deep in heartbreak. NDTV live from Forensic Center, a sorrowful quest for DNA match. Science and sorrow at Ahmedabad Hospital. Doctors fight to give ID to remains.
Do you really know the company you invest in? What is the real picture behind presentations and claims? Is the outlook as rosy as the company claims?
Welcome back. This is a live rolling coverage of what the world today is closely watching. Right now, remember, there's an all-important G7 summit that is underway. We will have important bilaterals that get kick-started in the next few hours. And before that happens, Gauri, we've already spoken about the all-important pull-asides that Prime Minister Modi has had, whether it is with Mexico or also with South Korea. But yes, keeping our eyes focused also on the other developing situation between Israel and Iran. Then you have Donald Trump, who's talking of a quote-unquote unconditional surrender. He decides to rush from this G7 summit earlier, only to be a part of this all-important meeting right now in the Situation Room in the White House. So a lot is happening, a lot is churning, and this is going to be a long, important night, Gauri. But what are we expecting as far as the G7 is concerned now?
Indeed, and whatever decision that the Trump administration takes will actually have a huge bearing, a direct bearing on how the G7 evaluates Israel-Iran conflict. They may not come out with a formal communique. Donald Trump has said that he's not going to sign one, so there's not going to be any formal statement that will come out at the end of the leaders' discussion. But any clear messaging would be extremely important depending on what the Trump administration's view is. So what the G7 is likely to do, they've already come out with a statement earlier because Trump left early. So they came out with a statement earlier where they backed Israel and said that Iran is the reason why tensions took place and escalated in the entire region. So that has already happened. In terms of specifics, I believe two important meetings for India would be very significant. One with the Prime Minister Mark Carney. We've spoken about it, and second could be also very important would be the first visit that will take place between German Chancellor and Prime Minister Modi. This is the first meeting of the two leaders, and will set the stage, Deepti, in terms of how both leaders now view the relationship, which has just completed 25 years actually. So the next 25 years vision roadmap, the two will probably identify together.
And you know, I'm just taking a cue from what Gauri just spoke about Germany. And I do recall here on NDTV, we'd really gone big with that entire coverage when you had exposed the hypocrisy of the West when it comes to terror, when it comes to terror that emanates from Pakistan. But world across, you've only seen condemnation. But Germany again was one of those big powers that had come and spoken in favor of the right of defense of India. So I think it's important because New Delhi remembers which really are these players that have continuously stood by us in this fight against terror. The Prime Minister does speak about Operation Sindoor. He does say it is important for the world to know that why did we cross those red lines with Pakistan. And that is why, Gauri, you've seen that big diplomatic outreach vis-a-vis India, sending out our leaders, sending out our diplomats, our people to 33 world capitals.
Indeed.
To actually expose Pakistan, its terror factories, and also call out the hypocrisy of a lot of these powers.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Srivastav, that is likely to be a very important part of some of these pull-asides as well. The Operation Sindoor, India's position when it comes to Pak-backed, Pak-sponsored terrorism, all that is likely to be a very key part of the pull-aside conversations that are going to take place today, and some are already in fact underway as we speak.
Yes, indeed, it will. It's not part of the G7 agenda. But of course, in bilateral conversations, this will come up. And as you mentioned, Germany showed a lot of understanding. Germany is the biggest economy within Europe.
We'll connect that line with Ambassador Srivastav in just a bit. And the G7 family photo is also going to take place very shortly. The official welcome is underway of the leaders. This is this visit of the Prime Minister in Canada after a decade. This G7 summit is coming in. Okay, all right. Those are live visuals coming in of Prime Minister Modi being officially welcomed by Prime Minister Mark Carney. There you can see live visuals of PM Modi being welcomed by Mark Carney at the G7 summit. It's a very important meeting that will take place between the two leaders very shortly. The first meeting, Deepthi, of the two leaders. They're meeting for the very first time and hoping to really start a new chapter in India-Canada relations from here on.
Oh yes, and I think this is significant for a lot of ways. When you look at Canada, you talk of India, again you have this huge relationship, but a relationship that has seen a lot of ups and downs. But you've seen India, you know, Gauri, I must say this, standing its ground, no matter what, no matter whatever the pressure. The fact is that we told Canada unequivocally that these are lines that you need to respect, and if you don't, we don't stand with you anymore.
Absolutely, and India was very firm and remains so, that as far as Khalistani separatists that continue on Canadian soil, that is unacceptable to India. And New Delhi has said so in so many words to Ottawa. Very harsh, important and significant diplomatic steps were taken by India in the wake of how the Khalistani separatists and terrorists hijacked the India-Canada relationship. All that is expected could be repaired under Carney's leadership, simply because he is a pragmatic leader. He may be a political newcomer, but he is not new to how world finance works, world politics works, and he understands the relevance of New Delhi in Canada's scheme of things. And Deepthi, he actually said that in so many words, that for Canada to grow, Canada's economy to grow, it needs an economic engine like India.
Oh yes, so India has been speaking about the global south. India has been trying to assert that this is a world where you need to have shared priorities and you need to work together and keep everyone's interest in mind. I think we can also touch base with our colleague Ghazali, who's also joining us live right now. Ghazali, these are important pictures, important, powerful pictures that we are looking at, and this is just the beginning, I think, of a lot more that will come. And India, as always, is going to be driving this conversation, keeping in mind that there are shared interests that we are talking about.
Yeah, certainly. And this is not just a new initiative, because you see, wherever there has been change in presidency or wherever there has been change in government, like what we saw in Maldives, Mr. Moizu, just to draw the parallel, he was the person who was very critical of India during his presidential campaign. But when he came to power, he was the first one to be invited, one among the first one to be invited for Prime Minister's swearing-in ceremony last year. In the same way, here in Canada, it all appeared as if under Mr. Trudeau's tenure, India-Canada relations had taken a hit. Multiple accusations were made by the Canadian government back then. A similar set of officials is still are there in Canada, and yet for the G7 even Prime Minister Modi has been invited, and bilateral meetings are expected between Mr. Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister now. So certainly it's a reset button has been clicked by India and Canada both, and in the coming days we will see intelligence sharing on terrorism and multiple more MOUs and understandings between the two countries growing together, because India has always had this kind of relations or diplomatic or the foreign policies like this, that we are not discarding anyone. We are always embracing as a voice of the global south. India has always been open to new ideas, new relations, and that is why it looks very promising. These pictures are very promising. The Prime Minister is meeting the Canadian Prime Minister, and the bilateral meetings are expected to happen soon.
Pictures looking at the kind of potential that the relationship offers. Already intel sharing mechanisms are being talked about, Ghazali, between India and Canada, and there's expectation that trade will be the first shared interest that will pave the way for the relationship to really recover from Justin Trudeau's lows.
Yeah, certainly. And see how we had pulled out our diplomatic missions and our diplomats from Canada, how Canada had withdrawn, or we had asked Canada also to remove their senior officials from here. And this went on for a couple of months. And after that, there was a lull. There was no diplomatic activity between India and Canada, but India was waiting that the moment there is a new government there is the new face in the leadership in Canada, things were moving in the back channel. And that is why just a couple of months ago, we had this meeting of Intel chiefs from across the world. And even then, Mr. Ajit Doval, the NSA, India's NSA, and his counterpart from Canada, they all met there, and it started moving. It appeared now that India and Canada have gone to reset their relations. And very soon, this meeting is certainly an indicator that India and Canada are now going to reset the relationship, be it with trade, technology, security, like any other country with which India has good relations. Canada being part of G7 is certainly very significant to have them on our side. And also, as you rightly pointed out, when it comes to intelligence sharing, to counter a mechanism to counter terrorism and all, that will be very significant, and we will see some concrete steps between the two countries to curb on these extremism or those voices who are critical of India, those voices who are anti-nationals, and how Canada had become a safe haven for all those who had committed crime, were involved in terror activities in India, those who were fomenting trouble here in India, but were very safe there in Canada, were given safe shelter in Canada. Perhaps on that front as well, we will see some concrete action after this meeting gets over. In the days to come, India and Canada will certainly look to resolve or to solve that particular problem first.
Absolutely. And I think Ghazali and Gauri, these are pictures that the diaspora will also be looking at very, very closely. When it comes to Canada, the diaspora is huge. And Ghazali, all of us know that when this entire episode was going on, I think we can also cut across to Maha, who has a quick update for us. Maha?
The handshake has taken place. That program was delayed by a bit. It was supposed to happen earlier, but because of some scheduling issues, the previous programs were on. The host, Prime Minister Mark Carney, was available for handshakes and pictures with the invited countries only now. And the big moment there, considering that there was friction for 2 years between India and Canada, to see those visuals will come as a big relief to many people, especially the community, the Indian community in Canada, that has been feeling the pressure of the diplomatic friction between the two countries. And they have been keenly looking forward to this time, because they believe that only once the two sides sit down and talk to each other will they be able to look at the differences and work on solutions towards them. So this is certainly a very significant photo op, because it is going to lead to a meeting later in the day between the two leaders, and all eyes keenly trained on that meeting as to what will emerge from that bilateral meeting. There could be some at least understanding on a law enforcement mechanism or some sort of intelligence sharing with regards to crime syndicates. At least that's what we've been hearing. But the very fact that the two leaders are standing there today, shaking hands, smiling at each other, is giving a good signal.
Absolutely, indeed it is. Maha, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much for joining us. On your screens, viewers, are those visuals that indicate a reset, a reboot, a fresh start to the India-Canada relationship, which suffered during Justin Trudeau's tenure. And the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Carney, meeting for the first time, hoping for a fresh start to the relationship. With that, we come to an end, viewers, of this very special broadcast of the G7 Summit in Canada. And Deepthi and I will keep getting updates as and when we get off the summit that continues and is underway.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night.